Even so it showed was good?
Yeah, because you're using that one.
Ready to go?
Yep.
What was that signal? There is a bit of an echo, right? Does everybody who's on mute have their sound down? Hello? Yeah, we're still getting that echo.
It's gonna be because you guys joined.
So I'm my sound off here. That's right.
Mm-hmm. You're live right now, so
Yeah.
How about
My sound's off.
now? Yeah, still.
it's gonna be from, no offense, but the iPad.
Now that we're all up there, you can disconnect the audio again, right?
It's
I just did.
better.
Okay.
Yep, it's good.
Yeah.
We're good. Excellent. Welcome, everybody. We do the motion for a public resolution to move into closed session. We did that. Could we get a motion at the council of the Township of Woolwich? We did that already, correct? So I'm reading the introduction.
Reconvene.
Reconvene. Resolution to reconvene, number 2, in open session at 7 p.m. What time are we? We're only 15 minutes late. Good job, everybody. Motion to reconvene. Councilor Martin, thank you. Mayor Sean, second. All in favor? Excellent. So now that we've started, I will remind council that this portion of the meeting is being recorded and live streamed to YouTube. I will also remind council to speak clearly and project their voice when they are talking so people viewing at home can hear. I will now do a roll call of council for the benefit of the public watching this meeting. When I call your name, please wave at your camera and say here or present. I, Councilor McMillan, am present and chairing this meeting. Mayor Shantz,
I'm here.
Councilor Martin,
Present?
Councilor Merlehan,
Present.
Councilor Redicott,
Present.
Councilor Shantz.
Present.
Excellent. With that, we'll move to item number 3, disclosures of pecuniary interest. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? I don't see any. Items to come forward from closed session, there are none. We have no planning public. So we have number 6, the presentations. So I'll give a brief introduction for all of the presenters and delegations tonight. We have a lot. So hopefully everybody is listening and can hear me. I'll read it once for everybody's benefit. We have one presentation and many delegations this evening. Before we begin with our presentation, I would like to remind all delegations of some guidelines for participating in tonight's meeting. Please leave your video turned off and your microphone muted until you are called upon to speak. Please be advised that it is at the discretion of the chair to allow or not allow questions. Staff are available for questions this evening, but may not have the answer to your questions. You have 10 minutes to speak to council. As there are many delegations here this evening, we ask that you keep your comments brief and refrain from repeating information previously delivered by another delegate. I think for tonight, we have 17 delegations listed. If everybody speaks for the full 10 minutes, that'll be just under 3 hours of delegations. So I will keep us to the 10 minutes. Delegations, when you have 1 minute left in your presentation, I'll give you a 1 minute warning, letting you know that you have 1 minute to wrap up, and there is no penalty for speaking for less than the 10 full minutes. After you speak, please wait for any questions from council. Once there are no further questions, please turn your microphone and camera off again. You may leave the meeting after your delegation is done if you wish. If you would like to remain on the Zoom call and watch the remainder of the meeting, you may do so as long as you keep your camera and microphone turned off. Any disruptive behavior may result in your microphone being muted or you being removed from the meeting. First presentation we have tonight will be introduced by our CAO, Dave Brenman, and it is the Ontario Clean Air Alliance. Mr. Brenman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to members of council, it's my pleasure to introduce representatives from the Ontario Clean Air Alliance. Recently, we had received correspondence from the Ontario Clean Air Alliance with respect to concerned about the province's move towards increasing the use of gas-fired plants. And I had an opportunity recently to meet with representatives from the Ontario Clean Air Alliance. And I also took the opportunity to speak with Tova Davidson. As many of you know, the Executive Director of Sustainable Waterloo Region, which we are members in, and also the staff that assisted us with our move towards a 20% reduction in our carbon emissions with a 2027 target. And one of the things I did in speaking with Tova was to speak about the advocacy work the Ontario Clean Air Alliance wanted to come to speak with us about. And certainly after speaking with her and speaking with representatives from the Alliance, it was clear that it was worthy of Council's consideration with respect to a proposed motion that they would like you to entertain with respect to what I would call provincial advocacy work in terms of the issues around the gas-fired plants. So with that introduction, Mr. Chair, happy to have the delegation speak to Council this evening.
Perfect, thank you very much. It is Jack Gibbons, Angela Bischoff, and Eve Wyatt. Are you there now?
Hello.
Welcome, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Councillor McMillan and members of council. I'm Jack Gibbons from the Ontario Clean Air Alliance, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you tonight about the need to phase out our gas-fired power plants. The Ontario Clean Air Alliance was established in 1997 to promote the phase out of our 5 dirty coal-fired power plants. We worked on that issue for 17 years until the last coal plant was closed in 2014. And now we're working to promote the phase out of our gas-fired power plants by 2030. And I'm wondering, is there a PowerPoint? Yeah, thank you. So if we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. This is the right slide. So this slide shows the greenhouse gas pollution from our electric power plants. It includes historic and forecast data, and it goes from 2005 to 2040. And the good news is that thanks to the phase out of our coal-fired power plants, the greenhouse gas pollution from our power plants fell by 93% between 2005 and 2017. But since 2017, the pollution from the power plants has started to rise again. And according to the IESO, or Independent Electricity System Operator, the pollution from our gas plants will rise by more than 300% by 2025 and by more than 400% by 2040. And if this occurs, we will lose 35% of the pollution reduction benefits that we achieved by phasing out the dirty coal plants. Next slide, please. So there are 3 primary reasons why the pollution from the gas plants is forecast to rise dramatically. The first reason is that Ontario's demand for electricity is forecast to rise by about 1% a year. The second reason is that the Pickering nuclear station is scheduled to close in 2024. And the third reason is that the Doug Ford government is planning to meet virtually all of our need for new electricity supply over the next 20 years simply by ramping up the output of our gas-fired power plants. That is, they're going to import more frack gas from Western Canada and Pennsylvania and ramp up the gas-fired power plants to meet virtually all of our needs, future needs over the next 20 years. Next slide, please. Now, as I'm sure you know, the government of Ontario has a climate target of reducing our provincial greenhouse gas pollution by 30% by 2030. But according to the Auditor General, we're not on track to achieve that target. But the good news is that if we phase out our gas-fired power plants, that will provide us with all or virtually all of the extra pollution reductions that we need to achieve our target. And that's why we're calling for the phase out of our gas-fired power plants by 2030, because it is the easiest and lowest cost way for Ontario to achieve its 2030 target. And also, by creating a fossil fuel-free electricity system, that will make it easier for the Township of Woolwich to achieve its greenhouse gas target of a 20% reduction by 2027. Next slide, please. So we're proposing a three-pronged strategy to phase out the gas plants. The first prong is energy efficiency investments to reduce our demand for electricity and therefore the need for gas-fired electricity. The second prong is Quebec water power. Quebec has a huge surplus of power from its existing facilities. Most of this surplus is exported to the US, mostly on the spot market, mostly at low prices. So this surplus power could be diverted to Ontario to help phase out our gas-fired power plants. And the third prong is wind and solar energy. Now, we all know that wind and solar used to be high cost, but thanks to technological progress, wind and solar are now our lowest cost sources of new supply. Next slide, please. Now, the good news is that energy efficiency investments and wind and solar investments will create jobs in every community in Ontario. And whereas if we simply import more frack gas from Western Canada and Pennsylvania, that will create no new jobs in Ontario. Now, with respect to wind and solar, we all know that the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine. So these options need a storage option. And Ontario is so lucky to be located right next door to Quebec because Quebec's huge hydroelectric reservoirs can act like a giant green battery for Ontario's wind and solar. By integrating our wind and solar with Quebec's hydroelectric reservoirs, we can convert intermittent wind and solar energy into a firm 24/7 source of baseload electricity for Ontario. So that's our plan of how we can actually phase out the gas plants by 2030. Now, I'm pleased to note that so far, 4 municipalities have called for Ontario to phase out our gas-fired power plants. They are Kitchener, Halton Hills, the City of Hamilton, and the City of Burlington. So I'm here tonight to request the Township of Woolwich to also pass a resolution requesting the province of Ontario to phase out our gas-fired power plants by 2030 to help the province and the Township of Woolwich achieve our climate targets. So thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, I'll be pleased to answer them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gibbons. Council, any questions for the presenter? Councilor Shantz?
Thank you, and through you to Mr. Gibbons. What about the waste at the end of the life cycle of these plant or the wind turbines and also the solar? I've been doing some reading, and the toxic waste at the end doesn't sound very, very good. For example, the solar panels have cadmium and lead that we have to deal with. And they also have glass panels that can't be recycled because of all of the dirt in the panels. And the wind turbines have the blades that have to be thrown out and can't be recycled. So where does that factor in?
Well, Councillor, like you're right, there is no perfect electricity supply option. They all have problems, but the vast majority of the components of wind and solar can be recycled. But you're right, there's no perfect solution. But the gas-fired power plants, they are producing the greenhouse gas pollution that is causing dangerous climate change. And so we believe that on balance, it's better to invest in renewables like wind and solar than to ramp up the production of our gas-fired power plants by over 400%.
I think I saw Sorry, Councillor Sean, so follow-up question or a different question?
Yeah. So if I could just follow up on that, so some of the websites have U.S. removing 8,000 blades a year in 10 years, and it takes one truck to haul these blades to the landfill, and then 720,000 tons of waste blade material that is going to the landfill. So are we just diverting the problem?
Well, no, in our view, the problem of climate change is much more serious. We need to dramatically reduce our greenhouse gas pollution during the next 10 years. And certainly we believe that phasing out the gas plants is the easiest and lowest cost option to do that. Yes, there's some waste, but we don't have a complete recycling option now, but that doesn't mean that we won't be able to find a recycling option going forward in the future.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Merlehan and then Redicott.
Thank you, Councillor McMillan, through you to Mr. Gibbons. Mr. Gibbons, are you pretty encouraged by the recent election of Joe Biden and the announcement of John Kerry being the environmental czar and the immediate renewal back into the Paris Accord? And do you see that Canada stands to benefit just from the business opportunities that Mr. Biden has been talking about throughout his election, that there will be lots of good paying jobs everywhere, as you mentioned, and that in the long run, what you're proposing here is something that that everybody should get behind?
Well, absolutely. With the Biden administration, there will certainly be a big push for energy efficiency and renewables. And the sooner that Ontario gets involved in it and develops the expertise, there'll be more export opportunities for us. But I think it's really, I'm glad you brought up about President-elect Biden, because a key part of his plan is he's committed to phasing out all fossil fuel electricity generation by 2035. So what we're proposing is 5 years ahead of him, but we're going in the same direction. And Ontario's very fortunate because of our geography, that we definitely have the ability to be a leader and to phase out all of our gas-fired power plants by 2030, 5 years ahead of what President-elect Biden is proposing for the United States.
And if I could just have a follow-up, Chair? I'm just wondering if you could provide council and anybody else who's listening, what are the dire warnings right now for where we're at with climate change, and what would you say to people that there are people that still believe that climate change is just hot weather? From your perspective as having studied climate change, what do you say to those people to convince them that this is an emergency, which this council has already declared a climate emergency? But what is it that you say to these people that don't understand what climate change is and what it means, what it would mean to Woolwich Township?
Well, I think I would point out to the fact that, the vast majority of the scientists who are experts on climate change believe it is real and a very serious problem. And it's not just scientists, but also people like the Pope who say that we have to deal with climate change. And, we've seen the fires in Western Canada and the Western United States, and we're experiencing, more flooding, and we're experiencing more droughts, and we're seeing already, dire consequences. And according to Environment Canada, the rate of climate change in Canada is more than double that of the rest of the world. So it's a very serious problem, and virtually all the scientists who are experts agree about that.
Thank you very much.
Talk about presidents, I don't know, Trump was convinced that wind turbines cause cancer, so it's should be worried. Councilor Redcott?
Yeah, through you to Mr. Gibbons. So what percentage of our electricity that's generated is generated by gas-fired power plants at this moment?
Well, last year it was 6%.
6%?
Last year, yes.
And renewables at this point, how much?
Well, last year, 8% was wind and 2% was solar.
Okay,
And
Thank you.
about 24% was water power, like from
and the
Niagara
rest
Falls.
and the rest is nuclear?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Martin?
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Gibbons. It's very easy to say that we need to be more efficient with our energy. Where would you begin? And secondly, if Quebec has all this extra energy that's low cost and they're trying to get rid of it, why haven't we tapped into that a long time ago? Isn't that a no-brainer?
Well, it certainly is a no-brainer. Quebec water power is very low cost. It's a very low cost form of electricity that can lower our bills and also, reduce our need for gas-fired generation. And so it's clearly good for the electricity consumer. It's clearly good for the environment. But you have to also remember, in order to understand why it hasn't happened, you have to remember that Ontario Power Generation, which is owned by the government of Ontario, and owns 5 large gas-fired power plants. In fact, Ontario Power Generation is the largest fossil fuel electricity generator in Ontario. This year, it spent $2.8 billion to buy 3 gas-fired power plants. So clearly, Ontario Power Generation doesn't want to see the gas-fired power plants phased out. And I think they have an undue influence on the provincial government. But if you look at it from the point of view of what's best for the consumers and what's best for the environment, we should be buying Quebec water power. It's very low cost. The city of Cornwall is in a unique situation. They've obtained 100% of their electricity from Quebec for 50 years, and they have the lowest electricity rates of any municipality in Ontario. And during the 2003 blackout, their lights stayed on.
Councilor Shantz?
Thank you. So does Ontario not have a means of doing water power as well, other than Niagara Falls?
Well, yes, we get 24% of our electricity from water power, and that's not just Niagara Falls, but many other water power facilities. But basically, Ontario has now tapped out all of its large, low-cost water power facilities. And so if we want to get more water power now at a low cost, well, Quebec is the obvious solution.
Okay. Any other questions from council? Is there a question?
Yes, Mr. Chair, there is a resolution that would have been in your package. I think it might have also been, I'm not sure, Alex, whether it can be shared on the screen. It might have been at the end of the PowerPoint presentation.
No, it wasn't in the PowerPoint, I don't think, but maybe it's definitely in your agenda.
Yes, it was.
Okay, so we've got a request for a resolution. Sorry, I
It's shared
didn't
on the
see it in the-
screen.
So that request is being made to council.
Yes. So, Mr. Chair, if I can help to I think shape the ask, is in talking with the Ontario Clean Air Alliance, so whether you want to approve this resolution exactly as it is or some version of it, one of the things that you can consider, or two things that you should consider is this. The Ontario Clean Air Alliance has noted that if we continue on the path with using the gas-fired plants, that impacts all municipalities in terms of difficulty in reaching their climate targets. Outside of that, what I've learned from talking to the Ontario Clean Air Alliance and Sustainable Water Region is also to date that there's been insufficient information back to the province to validate why they have not searched out Quebec water power as a viable option, why energy efficiency is not a valid replacement as part of the solution as well, and why the issues around solar and wind are also not viable options. So at the very least to date, as I said, what I've found is the impact that it will have on our climate, our ability to reach our climate change target, and also with respect to, I think at the very least, passing a motion of some sort would allow us to advocate to the province to say why, what are the answers to why these options that Ontario Clean Air Alliance has noted, why are they not valid? Why are they not on the table? Because to date, there's been insufficient answers on that, it's my understanding. I just wanted to shape that context.
So, Mr. Brenneman, I don't want to put words in your mouth here, and there's no formal report from staff, but is it safe to say that staff, if they were making a recommendation, would make the recommendation that council approve a motion, if not the one precisely written as the request here, at least putting this on a future agenda item where council might pass a motion that could help the corporation of the Township of Woolwich achieve our climate goals through this request to the province?
And also, Mr. Chair, request of the province that they answer the questions around the other options. So yes, if not this motion, and if council's not comfortable with this motion, certainly staff would be recommending that you entertain some motion which would say we have concerns around the use of the gas-fired, and what about these alternative options that the Ontario Clean Air Alliance has outlined? So, council, is anybody prepared at this time to either move the requested motion? Let's start there. Is somebody prepared to move the requested motion? Councilor Merlihan? Move?
Yeah, I'll move the motion as written.
Okay. Councilor Redicott seconds the motion. Anyone want to debate, comment on the motion? Councilor Shantz?
Yes, thank you. I think we do have to do something about climate change, and don't get me wrong, but I do think we have to look at what the alternatives are going to cost us in the end. And if we're just kicking the can down the road, is that the right thing to do? And this is one side of the argument, and we don't have all the information as to what the other side is of the waste. And I think we should have that information so we can make an informed decision. So I don't know whether we can get staff to look at something like that and give us some information. I've just Googled a few things and it looks pretty scary. So, I mean, yeah, we can maybe eliminate some of our climate increase in temperature. But if it's going to fill our landfills and do other nasty things, I think we have to have more information on it.
Mayor Shantz?
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with Councillor Shantz in that we need to look at the entire picture. I certainly support reducing greenhouse gases, and I understand that fossil fuels are a huge part of that. I would prefer a motion that was a little more in the lines of what Mr. Brenneman was suggesting, where we put out there what our concerns are and ask the province to find answers to those, rather than specifically just looking at the gas plants.
Councilor Martin?
Thank you. I like the direction Mr. Brenneman laid out for us. I think that's more the way I would think. We get more answers and make the government aware and ask them to, look at some of these other things. with due respect to what we heard tonight, I know that, you know, they have an agenda, and, but I'd like to see a bigger picture.
Okay, there is Councillor Merlin.
Just in response to the whole kicking it down the road, we've been kicking this down the road for 60 years. Climate change has been on the books. Scientists have been crystal clear about what is causing climate change. And, you know, we have to reduce our emissions. We have to change how we behave. And, you know, this motion at Woolwich Township isn't going to change the world. I understand that, but we need to start being leaders and understand this. Another report isn't going to convince me that climate change is here. It's here. Everybody knows it. And as far as you know, things that go in the landfill, yes, that's concerning. But you know, continuing to poke holes in the ozone layer and is even more concerning. You know, flooding, fires, all this stuff. It is happening on the news. You just have to look at the news anywhere in the world, and you see what climate change is doing. So I'm not interested in any more reports. What, you know, this is basically asking the government to take a part in this, and there's a fairly viable solution to make that happen. I'm sure the government, you know, will listen to these kinds of motions and then do the studies themselves and see what makes sense for Ontario, and see, hey, if we can partner with Quebec and instead of selling electricity, you know, probably below cost to the U.S., then we should be working with and keeping that within Canada. So I just hope that we could just pass this motion as is and get on with business.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Merlin. Mayor Shantz?
Yeah, thanks. Just to be clear, I'm not denying climate change, and I'm not saying we shouldn't do all of the things in this presentation or in this report. I was just concerned about the wording of the motion and making sure that we're saying exactly what we mean. You know, there's the other piece to what Councillor Shantz was talking about was there's also transportation costs, which cause gas emissions. And so my concern is always that we look at the entire picture and not get too narrow in our focus. So that's where I'm going. In principle, I support the concept for sure.
We got a really cram-packed agenda here tonight. So we got a motion that's seconded on the floor. I'm going to call the question now. So the motion, as moved by Councillor Merlin and seconded by Councillor Redicott, was on the screen. It's in your packages. I'm going to ask all in favor. Can I vote on that? Chairing the meeting?
I vote, so
You'd have to ask for a recorded vote.
you can ask your.
Okay, I won't ask for that. I won't ask for that.
I'll ask for it on your behalf. Okay.
It's not going to make a difference though. I'm going to tie, right?
Depends how I vote.
All right. Okay. Recorded vote was asked for. So I just go in alphabetical order. Is that correct?
I will do it now.
Oh, you'll do it? Okay.
Yeah, so the way we're gonna do it is I'm going to go not in alphabetical order. That was a previous request of council, so that when we do recorded votes, it's not always the same. So if you vote a yes, you're voting in support of this motion, that it be resolved that Township requests the government of Ontario to do the interim cap of 2.5 megatons and so on. That's in your packages. If you vote no, you're voting against that motion. So does everybody understand the motion that is on the floor?
Mhm.
So it's yes or no. I'm going to call your names. I'm going to go with Councillor Shantz,
No.
Councillor Merlahan,
Yes.
Councillor Martin,
No.
Councillor McMillan,
Yes.
Mayor Shantz,
Yes.
and Councillor Redicott.
Yes.
That's 4 yeses and 2 noes. Motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation, Mr. Gibbons. Thank you, staff, for the contribution. Thank you, council, for the excellent questions and inputs. With that, we'll move on to the delegations. Our first delegation is RARE, Charitable Research Reserve, and the delegate is Dr. Stephanie Sobek-Swan and Dr. Tom Woodcock. Doctors, are you here?
Hello, I'm here.
So, like I mentioned before, we will limiting it to 10 minutes. I'll give you a 1-minute warning when you're 9 minutes, and there is no penalty for not using the full 10 minutes.
Sounds good. Can someone bring up the presentation, please?
Your time won't start until everything begins. Don't worry. I'm not going to be that tight on you.
All right. Well, thank you very much for welcoming us here today. I'm here today to talk a little bit about our new rare sites land securement strategy, which is focused on protecting more land for conservation across Waterloo region. Next slide, please. So as many of you know, as a Land Trust and Environmental Institute, conservation has always been RARE's priority. We currently own 989 acres of conservation land in Waterloo region in Wellington County, and we actually will be celebrating our 20-year anniversary next year as our education and research programs also continue to grow. And we are currently in the process of finalizing, and it will come out shortly, our next 5-year strategy and plans. And one key focus will be to launch and implement the Rare Sites Land Securement Strategy, which I will be presenting here today. Next slide, please. As you are all aware of, Waterloo region is home to more than 550,000 people already and expected to grow by another 35% over the next 20 years or so. So with this increase in population, land is also, of course, increasingly becoming more highly sought after. And it is really important that we grow the percentage of conservation land alongside development to protect the ecosystem services and other benefits our health and well-being and also our agriculture depends upon. Next slide, please. So in the fall of 2014, Chris Gosselin, who was the planner at the region at the time, hosted a first meeting here in the region to discuss the opportunity for a community-organized, not-for-profit regional multi-property land trust. And one of the reasons why he called this meeting is this map here, which gives you an idea of the different land trusts in Ontario. And where this red arrow is pointing, this was what previously was known sort of as the hole in the donut, where there was no jurisdiction of any multi-property land trust. So Chris felt really strongly about that this is a real need in this community to be able to protect more land in a community-based manner. So a number of representatives and community members came together to ultimately form the Rare Sites Land Securement Team as part of RARE's organizational framework, with the particular mandate to develop and implement a land securement strategy for this area particularly. Next slide, please. So there are a number of organizations in the area who also have an environmental focus that relates to the protection of land. However, many are currently either not actively acquiring new lands for conservation, or their focus is simply slightly different. For example, the Ontario Farmland Trust is a good partner that we work with, but their primary focus is on farming easements, for example. So over time, many of these organizations listed here have indeed become partners in our efforts and are now also members with representatives on the Rare Sites Land Securement Team. Next slide, please. So the purpose of a land securement strategy is to actually identify parcels of interest for conservation. So in our case, this meant applying a real watershed perspective, because natural lands and ecosystem services, of course, don't really end at our municipal boundaries. So protecting the tributaries and headwaters of the Grand will really have much positive impact on the ecosystems that are further downstream as well. So the main criteria that were applied included ecological significance, connectivity, and also looking at the size of parcels. So basically, we determined a number of desirable characteristics of conservation lands, for example, habitats such as wetland or woodland or floodplain, and also the proximity to existing secured land and a number of other issues, for example, urbanization threat, the potential of funding, and also the geographic dispersion to ensure that we could serve every lower tier municipality within the region of Waterloo and Wellington County. And of course, we also sort of have to limit our efforts to a reasonable number of parcels and potential landowner contacts that can be approached in a first 5-year program period. So this allowed for a modeling process called the REA score, which Tom Woodcock mainly conducted, who is here today as well. That was undertaken in a geographic information system, short GIS. So you make layers in this geographic information system to identify any desirable conservation lands, and then you calculate the percentage of each parcel that consists of these types of lands. And the ones that score really high, say in the 90s to 95th percentile in terms of coverage, are then basically what we'll show in the following. Next slide, please. So in total, we looked at almost 15,000 parcels that were analyzed using this GIS model, and we identified 17 target areas with 365 properties, and these had between 7 to 81 lots per target area that had the most desirable land for conservation. So here in Woolwich Township, there are 3 target areas that are part of the township. One is the Kitchener-Waterloo area, then the Sunfish Lake, Laurel Creek, and also the Brent River Forks. And the total number of properties that we have identified are 25, which amounts to almost about 1,500 acres in the township that could be of potential interest for conservation. So you have to kind of take it a little bit with a grain of salt, because now we have to do the footwork to actually check and sort of ground truth what the computer has spit out in terms of data. So that's why we hope we can continue to partner and hopefully work closely with the township in identifying parcels that could be of potential interest, because I know you know your area probably much better than we do. And also our cutoff has been really quite tight with the high percentiles, and there might be a lot of other land that could be of potential interest as well in the future. So next slide, please. So based on a number of landowners that we are already working with in the region, we're kind of well on our way to meet our target of hopefully 400 hectares of additional land secured in the next 5 years, which would be very exciting. Sometimes it can take quite long to actually turn a property into a conservation project, because some of the properties that are currently under consideration, it just takes quite some time, even if the land comes to us as a donation. We are committed to also raise a 20% stewardship endowment with every parcel that we take on, because we really want to make sure that we can secure and protect these parcels in the long term. Next slide, please. So to give you a bit of a better idea of what this could look like, here's an example target area, the Rosewell Swamp. And it's a very simplified map, but you can see that this area already has protected lots that, for example, belong to the GRCA and Waterloo Region Nature, which are sort of the light peach and the light green one that you can see here. And the parcel that is outlined in pink right now is one that will come to REA as an EcoGives donation, which will be ready to be hopefully announced shortly. So this parcel coming to REA is 44 acres in size, and it kind of gives you a better idea of what the strategy is, because it is of course desirable over time to protect more land in this target area that could lead to a connection of all the existing protected properties, and thereby create a larger area as a wildlife refuge, and that also serves as a corridor for wildlife over time. Next slide, please. So many of the lands under consideration right now will hopefully come to REA as land donations, which is, of course, from a budget perspective, highly desirable. But often landowners really only know one of two options, or two options. It's either to sell the property or leave it to their children. But depending on what the wishes are of the landowner, this might not always be the most desirable outcome. Next slide, please.
Dr. you have 1 minute left.
Yep, I'm almost done. So there's a number of other tools that can be applied. an eco-gift donation, like I mentioned before, is one of them. Another option would also, for example, be a conservation easement, which would put something on title that would really identify the lands that are of interest for protection, and the landowners could retain the parcel while parts of it can still be secured. Next slide, please. The eco-gift program gives a number of taxable benefits to the landowners. So if anyone has more interest in that as a tool, please connect them with us and we are happy to talk to them. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. Our main reason for being here today is that we really want to spread the word that we are here and ready to work with a number of different partners to hopefully protect more land in the future. So if you work with any landowners or developers that may have surplus land or anything along those lines, please absolutely think of us, let them know, and we hope that we can continue to have a good partnership. Thank you.
You finished with 1 second left. That's
oh my God, nailed it.
Excellent. Council, any questions for the delegation? Mayor Shonks?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the presentation. You do very interesting work and research, and I appreciate it. I just wonder for the people listening, if you can just explain a little bit briefly the difference between what you do and what someone like GRCA does.
Okay, so we are a registered charity, so we are funded and governed quite differently. So the GRCA's, one of their main focus is really research, management, and flood protection. So our focus, our priority program is conservation. So the protection of conservation land, acquiring more land for protection. And to my knowledge, currently the GRCA is not currently acquiring any further parcels. So I think we can really be good partners in conservation there as well and sort of complement each other.
Thank you.
Anyone else, Council? I don't see any, so thank you very much for the delegation. Excellent presentation. And we will move on to our next topic for delegation. And that's
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's going to be the Elmira Children's Center potential closure. And we're going to go to Mayor Shonts for a little bit of background on this issue before the delegations.
Thank you. So first of all, and I think probably everyone here knows this, but the daycare is the purview of the region, and so our decisions here aren't specific to the daycare itself. The region had a public meeting last week, and we'll be entertaining a staff report on December 2nd to make further decisions regarding the daycares. And I also want to say very clearly, Elmira Daycare is associated with Riverside School, and I've been assured that the Elmira Daycare will not close.
Excuse me?
The region of Waterloo is both a service manager and a service provider. And so we have two roles. We're considering ceasing operating the 5 centers that we currently operate, and Elmira is one of those. And what that means for Elmira specifically is that there may be another operator running the center. The decision on how to proceed with Elmira will be made sometime after September 2021 based on the proposal that's in front of Regional Council now. So as a service manager, the region will continue to license, oversee, and provide support and guidance to all licensed daycare operators. And that's the mandate that we have. So I hope that gives a little bit of background.
Thank you very much, Mayor Shonts. With that introduction complete, we'll move to our first delegate on the topic, and it's Carrie Linscott. So Carrie, you can unmute your mic, and I'm not sure if you heard the other presenters. You have 10 minutes. I'll give you a 1-minute notice at 9 minutes, and we're not going to start the clock until you begin presenting.
Okay.
So whenever you're ready.
Okay. Can you see me okay?
I can.
Okay, great. Okay, good evening, and thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Carrie Linscott, and I'm a mother of 2 young children. I'm speaking to you today about the proposed closure of Region of Waterloo operated childcare centers. So on November 12th, we were informed as a result of the third-party external review, the Children's Centers Review Steering Committee is recommending the closure of the 5 regionally operated childcare centers. So my 3-year-old currently attends the Elmira Children's Center, which is located inside of Riverside Public School. And I'm on maternity leave right now, and I have my 4-month-old on the waiting list for next summer. So if I don't have a spot for my daughter, that could impact my ability to return to work. Our family chose this center for its consistent, reliable care with highly educated staff. We were not able to find that anywhere else when looking for childcare in Elmira. There are such few infant spaces available in Elmira and the surrounding area. So many of the close by centers, such as the newly opened Fun Learning Center in Elmira or St. Jacob's Daycare, do not even accept children until they are 18 months of age. So the regional children's centers, they set the bar for quality childcare. The programming is based on an established high scope curriculum that provides a framework for cognitive, social, and emotional learning. The children are provided with nutritious homemade meals in line with Canada's food guide. And the regional services are streamlined as well so that early intervention can occur within childcare centers before children enter the formal school system. And staff attend regular training and have opportunities for professional development. So yes, this childcare may be expensive, but it's an investment in our community. So I was going to share a couple examples of my screen. Just a second here. Here we go. And sorry, there we go. So this is an example of a weekly learning plan that we actually receive through our email. So again, you know, there's a number of things that they're working on. This isn't just, you know, they're not just entertaining the kids. They have a very highly educated curriculum that they work on different things each week. So this, for example, they were working on, you know, fine motor skills and sensory play and different things that really allow them to grow and develop. So the regional staff, the Region of Waterloo staff are recommending the elimination of more than 60 full-time positions in a female-dominated workplace. So we have low staff turnover at these centers because of the training and the competitive compensation that's associated with better program incomes. And better program outcomes means that it's better for our little ones in our community. So my daughter has had some of the same teachers since she started at the center 3 years ago. And I truly feel that these jobs are worth protecting. Many of these amazing staff reside in Elmira as well. So the choice to make this recommendation now, as our region is facing a second wave of the pandemic with such little time before a vote is being made by the region, is very unsettling and disappointing. The timing of the results of the review came only 1 week prior to the initial public input meeting that was held last week, and parents and caregivers of the region were not invited to be part of the steering committee. No communication occurred from the steering committee in the 8 months between the consultation and the subsequent recommendation. In order to achieve full collaboration, the steering committee should have been comprised of half counselors and Region of Waterloo staff, as well as half parents and caregivers from across the region. So as you know, Sandy said, the Elmira situation is a little bit different since there's an agreement with the school board to run a center within the space. But as you can appreciate, parents are still concerned about the future of what our center holds. Who's this new operator going to be? How are the kids going to transition? Is the cost going to be the same? Most importantly, is the quality going to be the same? Are the staff going to be receiving competitive wages? Will there be infant spots available? Rather than closing the centers and losing 200 quality childcare spaces across all of these 5 centers, I would urge the Region of Waterloo to seek creative means of supporting this excellent care. This might take the form of increasing fees, seeking internal efficiencies within the current programming, and further considering the other KPMG third-party analysis recommendations. So I understand that there are a number of budget pressures due to the current economic climate and results of COVID-19, but cutting childcare in the middle of a pandemic is simply not the answer to economic recovery. This article came out just a week ago, I think, so it was pretty timely. But essentially, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce is urging, Trudeau's government to put measures in place to get women back to work. The reality on the ground is daycare and schools need to remain open, and we need to get women back in the workforce. So again, just cutting this type of daycare and child, services just seems very silly to me. So I'd like to end my delegation by asking this council to pass a resolution requesting that the Woolwich Council does not support the region's recommendation to close these 5 centers. So thank you for your time and consideration. And yeah, let me know.
Thank you. Don't go anywhere yet. Council, are there any questions for Ms. Lynn Scott? Councilor Merlihan?
Sorry, I wasn't sure if you could see me because I'm just looking at a bunch of pictures of kids. Not a question, but your pictures of the teachers there were several teachers that looked after my kids 15 years ago, and they're still there. So say hi to Darlene, to both Darlenes for me.
Council, any other questions for the delegation? I don't see any, so thank you very much to the delegate, and we will move on to our second one. Donna Arsenault. Donna, are you there?
Chair, unfortunately, Ms. Arsenault could not be with us this evening anymore, so she will not be delegating tonight.
Excellent.
Probably to put them to bed.
Somebody else? Is that just somebody else? Okay, thank you very much. So we'll move to our next delegate, Rebecca Miller. Rebecca, are you there?
Yep. Can you see me and hear me?
We can hear you and we can see you. Whenever you're ready, feel free to start, and your time will not begin until you begin.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Shantz and councilors. My name is Rebecca Miller, and I'm here with you tonight, albeit virtually, speaking as both a Woolwich resident and on behalf of QP Local 1883. We represent the members at the Children's Center, including that in Elmira. I'm speaking tonight to share with you thoughts on the great work our childcare members do, as well to ask you in particular, Mayor Shantz, to support keeping the centers open. I understand that the Elmira Center may be temporarily spared from the decision due to the agreement with the school board, but the closure of the center and discontinuing the service as it is currently run is still on the table. You do have a voice and a vote when it comes to regional council, and we're part of the steering committee as well that recommended the closure of the centers. So just hoping that through the delegations tonight, I know you were present last week, hopefully we can give you a little bit of a different perspective on why we think they're so important and crucial to our area. So to begin, I would like to review the definition of a hero. A hero is a person who is admired or idealized for courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. Our childcare members are heroes. Our childcare members stepped up and said, how can we help when the COVID-19 pandemic started? Those members provided 24/7 childcare for our frontline workers. One story in particular that sticks out is how one of our members had to work with a child who had severe anxiety over one of his parents being late to get him from the center. The parent was showing COVID symptoms and was being tested. The caring demeanor, kindness, and compassion our members showed this child, as they do every child, helped to keep him calm when he was worried about his parent and while he was waiting to be picked up late. They put themselves at risk to ensure that children were safely taken care of while their parents went to work as paramedics, firefighters, police officers, hospital workers, and more. Our childcare members calmed children down, children they had no previous relationship with, who didn't know them and who were placed with them during a global pandemic. They reminded the kids that they worked with that their parents would be okay, that they would be okay, and that we would get through this. Getting through this is what we keep telling our members as well. Same with the families that are reaching out. We'll get through this, we'll fight this, and we'll beat this. Closing 5 childcare centers, providing spaces to over 200 children in the Waterloo region during a global pandemic should not even be a consideration. Parents get on the wait list when they're newly pregnant and even then wait months to receive a spot at a center if they're lucky enough once their child is born. Parents wait because they know it's worth it. The recommendation of the center closures is causing unnecessary stress on both families who utilize the care as well as regional staff. During a pandemic when mental health, stress, and anxiety are at an all-time high, this isn't anything that someone should have to think about. Families choose regional centers for many reasons. For those who were able to watch the public input session to Regional Council last week, we heard from many parents who have children with disabilities that were not comfortable with care elsewhere or simply couldn't find care for their children due to their unique needs. Regional staff provide a safe, comfortable, and routine environment for the children and encourage them to be the best version of themselves. The region partakes in high-scope learning, a highly regarded curriculum in the realm of early childhood education that was just spoken to by the delegate. Children excel at regional centers. One of our members shared a story where they had a child in their class with behavioral issues. Her parents were constantly receiving phone calls to pick her up early from school, which ultimately resulted in them withdrawing her from kindergarten. She was then placed in a regional childcare center and excelled. She enjoyed coming to the centers, her behavior improved, and there were no more phone calls home, which alleviated a huge weight off of the parents' shoulders. Regional childcare centers are often integral parts of obtaining services for children and helping to navigate a very convoluted and confusing system, whether it be for speech therapy, psychology assessments, occupational or physical therapy. Without the support, knowledge, and resources of the regional childcare staff, the children may not be able to as easily access services that they may so desperately need. Children at regional centers are offered opportunities to socialize with other children, read stories, sing, dance, and have healthy meals during the day. Having worked with many members in childcare, including the cooks, those children often eat better than you and I. The cooks oversee children's allergies, sensitivities, intolerances, and ensure that culture observances are adhered to. Many of the childcare teachers have been employed with the region in a children's center for more than 15 and 20 years. Private childcare often has a high level of turnover, but not at the region. The staff develop relationships with not only the children, but the families. Since the original KPMG recommendation came out, many staff, understandably, have reached out to the union. They're not concerned about their jobs. That conversation comes later. What they're concerned about is the children and the families and where they'll go. They're worried about the impact and what happens to the children. That speaks volumes to the respect, care, and compassion these children have, or these childcare teachers have, for the children they work with day in and day out. Regional educators are in good standing with the College of Early Childhood Educators of Ontario and receive ongoing professional development and training. They are dedicated to the families and children they are fortunate enough to work with daily. By supporting the closure of the regional children's centers to save a buck, we're putting a price tag on the children and the families in the region. We need to continue to be leaders in the community. Smaller children's centers often rely on the support and guidance of regional childcare staff. Without the centers, not only do hundreds of families lose quality care, other centers lose the support that they look for. Without the support, where do they turn? We're forcing parents in the midst of a global pandemic to find alternate care for their children and trust that all precautions will be taken as seriously as they have been with the region. That is, if they can even get a spot, as we've all heard of wait lists. That, or they take a leave from the workforce to care for their children and hope that they're able to find employment again when this is all over. Who knows when that'll be? We've heard the term economic recovery and how we need to start sooner rather than later to recover from the devastating impacts of COVID-19. On December 2nd, please vote to save Waterloo Region Children's Centers. Vote to continue providing quality care to hundreds of families in the region who depend on it. Vote to maintain employment for the over 60 female employees, the heroes of childcare we all depended on at the onset of the pandemic and continue to depend on to keep children of the Waterloo region safe on a daily basis. I hope that you vote to continue to invest in the future of our community. I know this is a tough decision. I know that there is a lot of thought put into it, especially given the current economic climate, the deficit the region is running with, and the impacts of COVID-19. Cutting childcare services in the middle of a pandemic in the midst of unprecedented times is not supporting our families and community. It is not conducive to economic recovery, and it adds stress to an already strained system. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Council, any questions for Rebecca? I don't see any, so thank you very much for the present. And we will move to Noelle Fletcher. Noelle, at this time, your mic. Noelle, are you there? We heard you before. There you are. We can see. Excellent. Not sure if you heard, but we're counting 10 minutes. I'll give you a 1 minute warning when you're at 9, and the time won't start until you begin.
Yeah, no worries. So, good evening. So my name is Noelle Fletcher, and I too am from QP Local 1883. I am the current president. And as Rebecca said, we represent all the childcare staff at the region of Waterloo. Tonight, there are so many things that we could discuss. We could discuss the short-sighted decision to close the 5 regional Waterloo childcare centers, the 60+ community members that Rebecca mentioned that will be without employment during a pandemic, and the families and women who may struggle to find childcare in the future. I know, Mayor Shantz, that you said that you have been guaranteed a childcare center at Elmira, but this does not guarantee. It's also first that we've heard of this. We have not heard that you've been guaranteed that. So it's interesting that we've been told something very differently. It doesn't also guarantee a childcare will be found, and it doesn't guarantee that it will be quality childcare. We could debate the fact that there is no plan moving forward to ensure childcare spaces in the rest of the region, and that the closures will result in the destabilization of childcare. We could discuss that all these budget pressures that the region of Waterloo is having, yet they're proposing a 0% tax increase. But I am going to share a story which I shared with the regional council about a parent, again, because we believe that that is more impactful. So here it goes. At 9 months of age, my daughter was diagnosed with severe life-threatening food allergies. She will have anaphylactic reaction immediately if she comes in contact with dairy, eggs, or peanuts. That means her throat will swell closed immediately, blocking any airflow. Chloe also suffers a rare form of these allergies, which can also cause a reaction resulting in her digestive system shutting down, taking as long as 5 hours after exposure. When choosing a childcare provider, we researched and interviewed numerous community childcare programs to find a quality center that could safely accommodate not only our child's development and emotional needs, but also her unique medical needs. It was difficult to find a program in our community that could meet these needs and were willing to accept Chloe. We chose the region of Waterloo's Children's Center as it was the only program that we felt were willing and able to provide the supports necessary to meet all our daughter's special needs. The Child Care Center dedicated hours of their time meeting, reviewing, triple checking, update, and growing with our family to ensure that Chloe was safe while attending the center. Multi-layer processes and procedures were implemented. Messages and signage to other families, informing them of our daughter's allergies, to unique menus and product planning with the chefs multiple times a year, to accountability amongst the staff, having to sign off on the food leaving the kitchen, entering the classroom, and then checked a third time prior to food being served at the table. Seating arrangements, serving, cleaning procedures are also followed by all staff. An individual safety plan is posted in the kitchen and classroom areas where all staff, permanent, contract, casual, and call-in, are directed to read, understand, and sign for accountability. At the end of each day, a summary of all the food Chloe is being served, touched, or eaten is sent home so we can monitor for the evening. The staff also attended an information session to learn about all the signs and medical steps associated with both types of anaphylactic reactions that Chloe could have. The regional centers set the community standards for the highest quality of early education and childcare by adopting high scope, a highly researched play-based curriculum. All staff are not only fully qualified ECEs, but certified high scope trained. And this was mentioned by a parent, another parent tonight. The staff maintain ongoing professional development as well as specific training in order to meet our daughter's medical needs. Again, as presented by other parents, these staff are long-term employees, which provides consistency and stability for both the children and families. Although all early child and childcare programs are licensed by the Ministry of Education, there are only minimum requirements. We all know what minimum requirements do. And these minimum requirements do not necessarily guarantee quality. As a parent who requires childcare in order to work, it is difficult to find a program in our community that can meet our daughter's medical needs. We have been confident that the childcare is safe Because it directly operated by the region, not only do they follow the ministry requirements, but they also have a second layer of requirements set out by the region that goes above and beyond just the minimum. The region's childcare programs are truly leaders in the community. This has been most evident during COVID pandemic, with the region's programs taking the lead in providing safe and essential childcare services while other childcare services were unable to do so. I have recently had our second child. We are very hopeful that he does not inherit his sister's allergies. I am not sure that I will be able to return to work if he develops these allergies and I no longer have the option of childcare at the region of Waterloo Centers. Mayor Shantz, we are asking that you vote no to closing the region of Waterloo childcare centers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Noel. Council, any questions? I don't see any. Thank you very much for your presentation. Council, there are no further delegations on this issue, but there was a letter from Woolwich Healthy Communities. The chair, Inga Rene, sent us a letter. That letter, did we get that through email, Val?
Yes.
Was that emailed to everybody? So you should have gotten that email. There's another letter on our agenda here, but that I believe is for Hawkridge Homes from Susan Bryant. So with that portion of our meeting is done and we will move on. Yeah, Mayor Shantz?
Yeah, thank you. If you don't mind, I'd just like to
Absolutely, yeah.
make a few comments. First of all, I know this is a very emotional issue. Childcare is probably the biggest stressor for parents of young children. And I know I've been there and I could tell you stories, but that's not what this is about. What I do want to try to explain a little bit is what I'm thinking and what I'm struggling with. This is not about the money. This is a philosophical question. It's, are we a service manager or are we a service provider? And that's where my mind is going to as I struggle with this issue. And I can tell you that every counselor is struggling a lot with where we're going to go with this. So as a manager, we're looking at putting 10% of our budget into 2% of the students to run the 5 daycares. And they are quality daycares. The staff is of the utmost quality. It provides a role model for other daycares. A role model, though, that is funded at a level that the other daycares can't emulate. So those are the things that I'm looking at when I look at a decision. I would like to see more of a plan and more of a guarantee, I guess, of what's going to happen with the funds. A good portion of the funds are coming from the province specifically for childcare. And so those funds need to go back into the childcare system. And that would, I don't know what that would look like. And that's what I can't tell you. And that's where my hesitation comes in, because I can't tell you what that would look like. But the bulk of the funds would stay in childcare. So I just want to put that out there for the community, that those are the things that I'm struggling with as we look at this issue as a regional council.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. Council Martin, not really an agenda item here. We had people come in to talk and Mayor Shantz as the regional councillor responding a little bit to that. So I will call on you now, but I think we probably don't want to get into a big debate on a non-agenda item here, but I'll go to Councillor Martin.
I'll keep it short. And I would just like to say that I applaud the region for this review and how they carry out the service. I don't think there's any argument that a private sector can usually do a better job than than the region would. Daycares are fine. I think they should be licensed and meet a certain standard. And I also think they should look after themselves, and I don't think they should be subsidized.
Councilor Merlehan,
I promise to be brief.
yeah, perfect.
I know we want to move on. I just want to start off saying, through you, Chair McMillan, I know that the regional councillors are struggling with this, and I know Mayor Shantz is, and Mayor Shantz is no monster. She's a very caring person that has taken this seriously. This is an emotional issue as it comes to our kids. We all get pretty protective of wanting the best for them, and I don't know any parent that really doesn't want the best for their child. My concerns are the lack of the plan. The KPMG report, failed to identify any kind of concrete way forward that would reinvest the money. And I took part, or I watched the public meeting with all of the different speakers at the region. One of the things that really concerned me was when the Owl Daycare executive director spoke, and the KPMG report talks about there being all this competition. She wants the regional daycare, and the scary part was that she said she looked at just their waiting list for the 8 daycare centers that they run, and their list was 2,700 people. And I don't know how removing 200. Maybe, we keep the Elmira ones or not. I don't know how you make up that list and those spots. And my family, we, 18 years ago when we looked at daycare, it was a struggle, and we were driving to Waterloo. I know, Councillor Martin, it's been a long time since your kids have been there, but it's a different world out there, and the daycare is very difficult to find, and women a lot of times need to be in the workforce. 2-income families is just to purchase homes is kind of essential. And I had that discussion with my wife, if we couldn't find daycare, that one of us was foregoing a career. So I would ask a deferral until a plan is in place, and that there are going to be more spots created, quality spots. Before we go forward with that, I have a whole lot of other things to say, but we'll continue for there. I know Mayor Shantz will make the best decisions she can. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor Merlehan. Thank you to our delegations. Thank you to Mayor Shantz for your insights on this. With that, we will move on to the next agenda item. We have our next delegation is Hans Potcamper speaking about the 2021 work plan from Woolwich Heritage Committee. Hans, are you there?
I am here.
Perfect. Whenever you're ready, feel free to take it away. Your time won't start until you start. And with 1 minute left, I'll give you a little heads up.
Mr. Chair, members of council, I believe you have received our work plan, which we have kept short and succinct. As you can gather, we have not been able to do much since March, so everything is on hold. And next page, please. In the meantime, we have been approached by the Maryhill Historic Society, who would like our assistance in designating the church, manse, and the wall cemetery in Maryhill, and work on getting a CHL sign for the Westmont Rose Cultural Heritage Landscape in place. We also would like to work on installing the remaining heritage plaques, which we had made a number of years ago, and we're trying to determine what exposure there is from an insurance perspective, but we hope to have that resolved shortly. We've also unfortunately had our files disappear at the township with the many staff changes. So we're going to have to go back to work and identify properties of historic interest. So that's in a nutshell our plan. We are asking for the same budget we had last year, or this year rather, which we really didn't spend for next year, which is $4,000 to support these efforts. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Podcamper. Council, any questions? Nope. Does anyone get, nope. Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Podcamper.
Please call me Hans.
Sorry, Hans. I apologize for that. Those long A's, I think Councillor Shantz and Mayor Shantz will tell you that the shorter long A's in the middle of the name can trip people up. So I apologize for that. Sorry about that.
Not a problem.
Thank you very much, Hans, for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
We will move on to the item number 7.4, the draft plan of subdivision 30T-16701, the zone change application for Hawkridge Homes. And I believe Mr. Vink is here to introduce this.
Thank you, Councilor McMillan and staff, council. I will keep it as brief as I can, but I'm going to be a little longer than normal, so bear with me. I'm sorry, because it is a little more complex in some ways. But I'm not going to go over the report in detail. The report's fairly detailed and goes through everything, I think, and covers most of the issues. So the subject lands we're dealing with are the lands, Hawkridge Homes. They're just off of Union Street, north of First Street. It's vacant land currently right now, has a former orchard on it. They are zoned and designated for residential. Okay, so those designations exist. So since those exist, anyone looking at the official plan would note, whether you're an existing industry or the community or a developer, that the land intended use is to be residential. Previously, the application did come before council a number of years ago, and then it went to the Ontario Municipal Board. At that time, it was turned down because they were unable to resolve the noise issues. So it wasn't turned down because the land use was inappropriate necessarily, it's just that they could not resolve the noise issues at that time. Given that the lands are zoned and designated residential, the property actually does have the opportunity to have one single family residence on it right now if it's so desired. They don't have one at this time. The previous structure did suffer due to neglect and was burned down. It's at some point has been torn down. The applicant has submitted the proposed plan, which is in conformity with the township's official plan, and provided a number of required reports and studies to council and staff for review. The application has been reviewed by the staff and as outlined in the report. We went through everything. We're reviewing the official plan, regional official plan, the township official plan, and the provincial policies and outlining how it conforms, as well as the proposed zoning that is to match with that. The development will be on full municipal services. It will conform to our staging plan. It will provide the road connections for modified grid. Development will not be in the floodway, and they will be conveying the park and the floodway portion over to the township. When lands are designated, basically the process here that we're looking at is to go through some good planning processes to review like the design and the number of units and what's going on here, but we also get a number of the technical studies, and that's the technical studies help us to review if the development is appropriate. In this case, we're dealing with a bunch of compatibility given the proximity of the industrial, both across the road on Union and First Streets. So those technical studies look at noise, dust, odor, look at that compatibility of this site and proximity to those existing uses. And they look at them and both all those uses being there and kind of that cumulative impact also. And they look at them on the normal day-to-day operations. They're not looking at them in, they're not looking at special random things. They're looking at what's the normal day-to-day, what's the typical operations that are taking place, and determining whether an appropriate subdivision development can take place next to them. So that's that compatibility component. Given that it is closer than the standard guidelines out of the province, that is where that compatibility looks to say, can those two get closer together? Can those technical studies review and address and determine what can happen to allow that development to take place, or what is the end result? In this case, their applications, they did those technical studies, they were reviewed by the township in the region, and they identified that compatibility can be addressed. So there are some standard noise warning clauses. There is, in this case, a noise wall that be proposed along Union Street, along those properties abutting Union Street. There's some building design requirements that they have to meet. However, with all those in place, they can address the noise compatibility. So yes, in a normal perfect world, we would never have everything exactly beside each other, but somewhere along the line, these two things meet, and that's what we're dealing with tonight. Even the PPS, provincial policy statement, and the place to grow and the township official plan, they even acknowledge that in the perfect world, yes, avoidance is best, but where you can't avoid, mitigation is acceptable. So in this case, we're dealing with mitigation, and that's where those studies come in. And even if still the province has a strong direction to see infill take place, and this is an example of an infill site. With regard to the noise study, I will note that the noise study did go through some review and was updated. The region did have the report peer reviewed. And as a result, the region has accepted the report and the peer reviewer, and they are satisfied with the recommendations that have come out from it. So I just want to be very clear on that the region has accepted the proposal. I want to touch on this one element. It's called the worst case scenario. We don't get to deal with this often, nor do we usually deal with this. Some people call it the blast zone. Some people say it's 1,000-meter distance around some of these larger industries. This is an analysis that's done by the industry in their worst case scenario. Say, if everything was to go wrong, what would happen? What might that look like? How far afield might there be some impacts? But it's not how planning works. We don't deal with the worst case scenario. Typical planning deals with the realistic day-to-day operations, like I mentioned before, and that's where those compatibility studies go. Worst case scenario, for example, you can't plan that way, because then you would say, let's say, some examples would be, if you had a house next to another house, what's the worst case scenario if there was a gas explosion? And now, all of you are quite aware that not too long ago, there was a gas explosion in Kitchener that one house impacted quite a neighborhood, but we don't build houses that far apart, okay? Same as you don't look at a gas station and say, oh, we can't have a gas station anywhere near anything else, because what if the gas station explodes? That's not how we plan, okay? We also don't plan to keep houses as far away from a roadway where we see tanker trucks or rail lines where we see chemical cars going up and down the road. We don't plan day-to-day planning that way. Those are worst case scenarios. We have mechanisms in place, best management practices, risk assessment that take place to reduce that from happening. So 99.9% of the time, we don't have those issues. So now we deal with the reality. So another part is if you took this 1,000 meters realistically and said, if there's 1,000 meters and we couldn't do anything around that, and we applied that everywhere, in Woolwich or in Elmira, for example, we couldn't even do anything in the downtown because 1,000 meters takes from Lanxess and Salkle area, takes you right into the downtown, which means if you held to that line that we had to plan for the worst case scenario, you would see no redevelopment anywhere between those buildings and the downtown. You would see no increase in density in the downtown. You would see no change of use in the downtown to something more intensive. And that's not how we plan, and that's not how we have ever planned. So I just want to get away from that worst case scenario as that's how we have to plan, and that's what we should be dealing with in this scenario. That unfortunately is not the reality. We're dealing with the reality of planning under the guidelines that the province has set before us, and what we deal with, a good regular everyday planning, which is this appropriate? Can it be addressed? And can these studies identify and address those issues? Which I said, yes, they have identified. They can address noise, dust, and odor and the compatibility issues on the average day-to-day scenario. Sorry, just. Another example of this, and just a recent example that council had to deal with this about a month ago, council dealt with the Stavanis development of Bloomingdale. So if you remember Bloomingdale, we were talking 7 lots. One lot was a commercial industrial lot right next to a residential lot. What did we have? We didn't plan worst case scenario, but they had mitigation measures. They had a noise study. They were required to put in a noise wall, and we're having 2 side by side. And it was approved, went through those kind of solutions. That is the day-to-day of planning, of kind of dealing with some of those items. Just because two are side by side, it may not be optimum, doesn't mean it can't be addressed. So Hawkridge application is no different in that respect. So switching topics, I just want to go on to a few other things. I just want to talk in terms of density. So from the previous plan that came before council a number of years ago, that was denied by the OMB, was actually a more dense plan than this one. They have reduced the density in this case, and if we think of our new subdivisions, if council thinks of the new subdivisions on Meyer or Breslaw, we're hitting a minimum of 55 people and jobs per hectare. This development's well below that. We're sitting close to 11 people per hectare kind of thing. The density is really kind of low. It's nowhere near as some of our new subdivisions are seeing. And they even took out the one block in the corner to accommodate Sulco a little bit, which means there's less residential. It's going to be a small commercial block. And by going through all that, they have reduced the potential amount of people in there. I would also like to point out the current existing R4 zoning on the property would allow them to go to a higher density if they had so desired. They have worked through this plan and they have proposed and worked with staff to go in an R5A zoning, which means they've reduced the density lower than they could have, and they've applied our design guidelines. So they have worked along those lines. Just to sum up, the proposed development conforms to the applicable policies. Compatibility has been addressed. The development will have some larger units against the existing residential on Bauman and College and First, and then might transition over to some of the smaller units to address some of those concerns there. The units will all front onto the College, Bauman, and First Streets. None of them will face Union Street. They'll be on full services. They'll provide for an infill development on an underutilized site designated for residential development. It will provide for the road connections in a modified grid, provide for the parkland and a floodplain that will be turned over to the township. The zoning will implement the design guidelines and is consistent with the proposed development and the surrounding area. The conditions of draft approval are attached and reflect all the requirements, including some of the engineering works that will all be required. And overall, the plan is acceptable development for the designated lands, and staff recommendation is before you tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Fink. Before we go to our presenters, our delegations, council, are there any questions for Mr. Fink? Councilor Merlehan?
Through you, Chair McMillan, to Mr. Vink. Any of the surrounding businesses, and we're going to say Sulco and Lanxess and HBK, will any future expansion or anything be, I'm trying to think of the words here, by having the development, will they be curbed at what they do on their own properties? I'm just thinking, I believe Sulco said they have had a few more trucks going by, and they're doing a lot more rail shunting and anticipate more work on site. So will they be affected by development being there for any future business?
So to some extent, it already impacts them. So because the lands were designated and zoned, that does have impacts to them, because they would have to acknowledge that in any of their operations. Now that the houses are there, it may add some additional challenges, not anything more substantial than probably they would have to be dealing with today. So I would say it wouldn't really impact them, because somebody could have, the houses are there and the land's already designated. So they will have to do, if they're they're increasing some of their activities, they would have to make sure they comply with the requirements from the province, from the Ministry of Environment, etc. But it shouldn't impact them any more than the lands already are impacting them today.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Shantz?
Thank you. Yeah, if a new company were to come into town somewhere and wanted to put up a chemical plant, how far away from residential would they have to be?
Well, that would be interesting, because generally speaking, we don't allow chemical plants anymore on our zoning, but there isn't a set distance. They would be looking at a zone. So they'd be looking for a property that was zoned. If they're looking to rezone a property, they'd be looking then to come to council and be a delegation, obviously making the applications. they'd have to be looking for land within an industrial area. So they'd be looking for land that's designated industrial. So the same sort of scenario would happen is they would come to us and they would then do the studies and the technical reports to determine if they could locate in that area, if they needed a zone change. The same as what Hawkridge had to do in this case for their proposal.
So there's no minimum distance for that kind of industry, but yet when we have farmland, we've got minimum distance to have a farm to a residence?
Through you, Mr.
Sorry.
Chair. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Sorry, Councilor. Sorry, Mayor Chauncey. Do you want to finish? I didn't mean to cut you off.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So through you, Mr. Chair. So yes, in farms, we have minimum distance separations required between barns and houses and barns. When we deal with planning our communities, Elmira, St. Jacobs, Breslau, etc., when we designate the lands and we zone the lands, we are looking at those compatibility areas and we're trying to address them to some extent. So normally speaking, we will put the two further away as best we can. So for example, I'll give you an example of that scenario, which would be first Arthur Street, south of and the south end of Elmira. When the industrial lands developed on the one side, the houses were already existing on the other. So what we did is the industrial lands across the road, we have slightly lighter industrial, and as you move further back, the heavier industrial. So they kind of buffer. So in future, that's how we would develop. We would make sure that heavier industrial uses stay further away from the residential. The reality is we got a situation in this case that's a little bit different because we have the two that are abutting each other. There's a history here, a long history. We're dealing with a vacant site in the middle that we're dealing with. In the future, we would have the industrial, like I said, further away, probably on the far east side, and which will be much further away from the residential. Those distances would be maximized as best as possible.
So why is that property still zoned residential then? If that's the philosophy that you use, why would that not be designated as light industrial?
So it could be one or the, that's the scenario that council many years ago went through when they designated the lands. Back in the day, that was quite a while ago, but they looked at the lands and determined what the best land use would be for that corner. So given the proximity basically to College and Bauman, and you're extending those streets that have existing residential, they looked at these lands as probably an extension of that residential, even though it would be abutting the industrial, that they said there's potential here that the best use is probably to finish it off with residential. And then when someone comes in for the plan of subdivision or development, they would address the compatibility through such studies as we have today of noise, dust, and odor that are in front of us tonight. So it was kind to pick one. If you put the industrial there, you would have put them really close to those existing residences and the dead end roads there, and then there would have been question about how to deal with those roads. So it's a selection that had to be made, and they determined the best use at the time would have been residential.
Okay, I'm done for now. Thanks.
Anyone else, council, before we move to the presentations? I don't see any. So with that, thank you, Mr. Vink. Don't go anywhere.
Yeah, I'll just go.
Are you downstairs? We can just stomp on the floor if we need you. Our first delegate on the matter is Arlene Beaumont. And I believe, Arlene, you've got some support with you as well. Is that correct? Arlene, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Yes, I'm here this evening with Peter Van Delden from RWDI. Peter is a noise consultant who was involved in our noise study and all the modeling that was done. And if you have questions, technical questions about the noise study, Peter will answer those for us. I did send a little PowerPoint. I'm wondering if we could just bring it up, please. Thank you. You can go to the first slide. So as Jeremy mentioned, our property is at the corner, or basically the corner of Union and First Streets. Next slide, please. So this has been a very long process for us. The initial application was made in January or February of 2016. We've had 2 statutory public meetings, one in April of 2016 and a second statutory public meeting in May 2019, because the proposal had changed a little bit as a result of consultations with the public and with Silco, Lanxess, HBK. most of the time over the last four and a bit years, or almost 5 years, we've been working on these land compatibility issues, largely related to noise. Our consultants did freedom of information requests to get information on the adjacent industry, and that was really a very long time in getting the information that they required. As Mr. Vink mentioned, the noise report has been reviewed twice, and the proposed noise mitigation measures have been approved by the peer reviewer and the Region of Waterloo. Next slide, please. So at the statutory public meeting, the first one we had in 2016, there were many comments from the community, including safety concerns about the local industry. And following that public meeting, we had some meetings with town staff, as well as the management at CCC, at Lanxess, and at HBK Woodworking. The results of that consultation was that we decided to change the plan a little bit. And if you go to the next slide, please. So we met with Ron Connage at CCC, and we talked about worst case scenario, even though it really is not something that we get a lot involved with in planning. But we did respect the fact that 3 of our lots, the lots that are at the corner of First and Union Streets, are within the area of worst case scenario. So we made the decision of our own accord to take those 3 lots and make them into a block for non-residential development. If you could go to the next slide, please. So we presented this new subdivision plan at the public meeting on May 7th, 2019. So we showed the block at the corner of Union and First Street as retaining the existing R4 zoning with a holding provision over top to prevent development until the holding provision was removed. Subsequently, we had discussions with Mr. Vink, and it was decided that the best way forward was to go ahead and rezone that block for C4A convenience commercial. There will be an exception to that zoning, which will eliminate any dwelling units. So there could be no residential on that block. And we've also, Mr. Vink also suggested that we could include an additional permitted use, that being a contractor's establishment with no outdoor storage. So, for example, a plumber or an electrician could rent a unit in there and use that as his base of operations, or his or her base of operations. Next slide, please. So the proposed development before you this evening, 36 residential lots, 12 detached and 24 semis, the 1 commercial block, as I mentioned. The 5 lots that are immediately adjacent to the existing residential neighborhood will be zoned R4A. The other 31 lots will be zoned R5A. And both of those would be with design standards, which regulate the placement of attached garages and provide for front porches. And next slide, please. So the plan of subdivision, you saw this at the meeting in May of 2009. Next slide, please. The proposed zoning has only changed with respect to that block at the bottom, that pink block. Originally, as I said, we had thought to retain it as R4 with a holding provision, and with subsequent discussions with planning, it was decided, let's just go ahead and make it C4, which is going to be the convenience commercial. So that's the only difference on this zoning map from the map that you saw in 2019. Next slide, please. So the proposed development, we're going to extend College and Bowman Streets. Lands within the floodway will be zoned open space with no development. Lands within the flood fringe will be subject to GRCA requirements. Hawkridge is dedicating a large park block, 1,634 square meters. So approximately 30% of the site will either be parkland or open space. Next slide, please. I don't want to get too far into the weeds with the noise report. You may have questions, and as I said, Peter's here to help us with those. But so we had a noise report that we submitted in 2016 when we submitted our initial applications. That noise report was, as I said, peer reviewed, that was updated, then it was peer reviewed again. So it's gone through a lot of scrutiny. Our noise report has concluded that road and rail noise is predicted to exceed the guidelines in some circumstances. However, the impulsive sounds from the rail car shunting is not expected to exceed the guidelines. Stationary noise from the surrounding industry will meet the guideline level once HBK completes some upgrades on its equipment. And Hawkridge has entered into an agreement with HBK for some cost sharing to help HBK make those improvements. Next slide, please. So the noise mitigation measures that have been approved include, as Mr. Vink said, warning clauses. We're going to have central air conditioning in every unit. And I want to just make the point, that's actually not something that came out of the noise study. It's something that came out of the dust and odor studies. So in order to mitigate dust and odor, we're going to provide central air conditioning in every unit. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, Hawkridge has an agreement with HBK for some cost sharing to upgrade their silencer. We will have a sound barrier installed along Union Street. That's mostly for outdoor living areas. The homes adjacent to Union Street have been designed not to have any windows associated with noise-sensitive spaces facing onto Union Street. So there won't be windows associated with bedrooms that face onto Union Street. And the homes adjacent to Union Street will have brick veneer on the side of the home that faces the rail line. Next slide, please. So I've just provided, I provided these concept plans last time around, just to remind you, we're looking at some pretty traditional looking, attractive homes. These would be the singles. Next slide, please. Semi-designs, these are the semi-detached models. Next slide, please. And some more semis. Next slide, please. So just to confirm, the township says we have sufficient capacity to service these new dwellings. The public and the Catholic school boards have both confirmed there's sufficient space for the expected number of students. Next slide, please. And the property has been zoned residential since the 70s. An environmental assessment was completed and a record of site condition has been filed. The noise consultants have worked very, very hard to establish these noise levels and provide good, solid recommendations for mitigation. We've worked with CCC as much as we can on the worst case scenario, and I believe that we've done the best thing we can do to mitigate for that. As I mentioned, central air conditioning in every single unit. Next slide, please. Just one more slide. I think we're pretty much done. The next slide, please. So the proposed development is consistent with the official plan at the township level and at the regional level. And Hawkridge is committed to working with the township and the region to create an attractive neighborhood for families. I think they've already demonstrated by the things that they've done voluntarily, turning those 3 lots into a block for commercial, and also the cost sharing agreement with HBK. They really want to go forward and create a great new neighborhood in Elmira. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Council, are there any questions for Arlene or the technical sound expert that she's got? Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. This would be for Mr. Van Dellen. And it is a sound question. Was the last study done in 2016? Was that the most recent study?
No, sir. There was much more recent work done. Final modeling was done in 2000, actually in May of 2000. Pardon me, 2020. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. And is in a study like that, is there any consideration with the fact that all the noise, the potential noise, is going to be generated during the night when most of the people are are sleeping?
Yes. During the nighttime, the limits are actually stricter. So the Ministry of the Environment limits during the nighttime are actually 5 decibels quieter, which follows what actually happens in reality.
Okay, thank you. And if I just another follow-up question through you, and this would be for Ms. Hummel, I think, would be how would they how would something like that be mitigated? Is it on a complaint basis, I assume? And if the noise is in the middle of the night, how does that work with your officers?
So I can confirm that that would be on a complaint basis, and enforcement would coordinate the investigation of any complaints that come in. The outcome does depend on other agencies because, for example, rail noise is federally regulated and there are the noise warning clauses. But the outcome would depend on the other agencies and the witness persistence and strength of their evidence. So the township can enforce, but they can only do so much in light of the influence of other regulatory bodies. We have to take it case by case.
So it would be up to the rail company to stop the noise, or would it be the company that's involved with it?
If a complaint came in about rail noise, we would have to consult with we'd have to work with the region, and it would be subject to federal regulations, which we'd have to determine at the time.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else, Council? Councilor Reddekamp and then Merlin.
Through you, Chairman McMillan, to Arlene Beaumont. How have you had much experience with signing documents saying that you're aware that there might be odor or noise? And what is the usual response? Like, and are those kinds of things legal? Would they stand up in court?
Absolutely. So I live in Mississauga. I happen to live right under the flight path for Pearson Airport. So depending on the way the winds are blowing, I'll have a few days of quite a few planes going over my head every day. When we purchased this house, we were original purchasers. We bought from the developer. We've been here for 23 years. And we actually signed, it was in our agreement of purchase and sale, that we acknowledged that there was, we're on the flight path, and we had to acknowledge that we understood that, at times that there would, be loud planes going over our head. So I have personal experience with that. Yes.
Councilor Reddekamp, follow.
So if the new residents there complain, where are they lodged? With the township or with the developer, or yeah?
So once the lots are sold to the people who are going to be living in those homes, complaints, the developer's kind of out of the picture then. The complaints would go to, I'm assuming, to the township. In my particular situation, complaints go to the Greater Toronto Airport Authority. Now, I know it's a different, obviously a different situation, but it would probably something similar, perhaps CP, or depending on where the noise is coming from.
Okay.
People might complain to CP, I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilor Merlin.
Thank you, Chair McMillan. I have a few questions about noise. I don't think they're too difficult. Getting back to the noise study, when you use the modeling for that, did you include train whistles and such with that noise? I just asked because I live on 2nd Street, which isn't that far from that development, and I hear train whistles in the night. If the windows are open, I definitely hear them. So I'm just wondering if you included that as part, or if it was just shunting sounds.
The shunting sounds, Councillor, was the issue of primary interest here, and so the whistling sound was not actually considered separately. No.
Okay, that was just has been an issue that has been before council already, and it's actually a hard thing to mitigate and very expensive too. The other question I have about noise is the noise wall itself that will be erected on Union. I'm just wondering what kind of material that would be. Is it like a wood fence, or is it something like those brick type things that you see along the highway? And I'm just wondering what kind of softening landscaping features would be planned to go along Union, so it's not just a big brick wall or whatever is planned there.
Okay, I can speak to the materials of the wall. The specific materials would be the purview of the township to decide what's, do they want it done out of cedar, for example, or brick. It needs to meet a specific density requirement, a face density. So nominal 2-inch, so basically a 1.5-inch lumber without gaps or cracks would satisfy that. But certainly it can be done out of concrete. It could be done out of brick. There are many, many different options that could be used. Keep in mind that it doesn't need to be any higher than 8 feet. And
okay,
Arlene, do you want to speak to the landscaping, the softscaping around it?
I'm just reading actually what was agreed to, and the minimum density is 20 kilograms per square meter without cracks or surface gaps, but a material, as Peter just said, a material has not been specified here. It just the density is specified here. And in terms of landscaping on the private side, obviously, the homeowners would be responsible for caring for their own property, and people might potentially plant gardens, on their side of the fence, plant gardens next to it. That wouldn't have any effect on the function of the fence. It would so on the private side, people will do what they'll do. The public side would be maintained by the township, I understand.
Okay, just my final thing, and I think I'd like, through you, Chair, to Mr. Vink. Maybe you could speak to the landscaping on the municipal side. I'm sure that comes down to the site plan, but this fence or brick wall or whatever is chosen, does the municipality then take over the ownership of that, or is that delegated to the individual property owners for whatever piece of section they have?
So yes, through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Merlihan. So on the landscaping, yes, on the township side, we'd be looking for our typical landscaping along that stretch, because there'd be no driveways or anything. We'd be looking for street trees. So there'd be trees probably about every 10 meters as possible. So that'd be our standard, because we're not talking a massive fence. Like they mentioned, the height's not out of norm by being about 8 feet. And the density is going to maybe look a little different than your typical fence, but nothing too out of the norm. Ownership of the fence will be by the property owner. That'll be in the lot and block agreement that it will be registered on title, and that's in the draft of conditions, that the landowner would be responsible for that fence and maintaining it and keeping it on their side of the property. So the fence would be on the landowner's property.
Okay, thank you for all those answers.
Anyone else, council, before we move to our next presenter? I don't see anyone, so thank you very much, Arlene and Peter. With that, we will move to our next delegation. It's Alan Marshall. Alan, are you there? Can you hear us?
I can hear you, Councillor
Excellent.
McMillan.
Perfect. Just like everybody else, your time won't start until you start, and at 9 minutes, I'll give you a 1-minute warning.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Woolwich councillors. The Hawk Ridge proposal, yet again. What could possibly go wrong? I believe the medical profession have a standard of do no harm. In its essence, what is this Hawk Ridge proposal doing? This proposal is going to put men, women, and children all in harm's way. it would have them laying their heads down on pillows closer to operating chemical factories than is recommended by any authorities. Is it okay to put human beings in harm's way as long as somebody is financially profiting? Does that make it okay? Or if a past council decades ago made an error by zoning this residential, does it make it okay today to continue that error? How many Woolwich councillors present can list from memory the number of fires and explosions, as well as toxic fugitive releases here in Elmira over the last 30 years? Most, but not all, have come from Uniroyal Crompton Comtura. Keep in mind, there have been many more toxic fugitive releases than there have been fires and explosions. And the fires and explosions are ridiculous, the numbers of those. How many Woolwich councillors know what toxic chemicals have been used or produced at Uniroyal Lanxess over the decades? Sure, you've heard of NDMA. Did you know that NDMA was known to be in the air for decades in and around Uniroyal prior to our drinking wells being shut down? Did you know that dioxins can move not only in solvent contaminated groundwater, but also as dust and dirt literally blowing in the wind? Have any of the Woolwich councillors heard of parathion? That was produced here in Elmira with company chemists carrying the antidote in their shirt pockets. This information comes from a former chief chemist, Fred Hager. Until that is they had the antidote in their shirt pockets until a Uniroyal employee in the US died on the job from parathion exposure. That ended production here in Elmira as well of parathion. This was not the first chemical to be either banned in Canada or around the world that our local company has produced. Diacetyl was a staple of production for a long time in Elmira. Multiple lawsuits in the US finally ended diacetyl's run here in Elmira. Diacetyl was considered one of the less harmful air pollutants for years in Elmira. Some of you, the older councillors, might remember diacetyl as the not unpleasant butter flavoring odor emitted by Uniroyal Crompton and Comtura. Smelled like butter and it was toxic. DDT was manufactured here in Elmira and its legacy continues on today. It is in the fish in the creek above provincial tissue residue guidelines. The MOE does nothing. It is in the creek sediments, soils, and floodplain soils, also above provincial health guidelines, as it has been for decade upon decade upon decade with nothing done by the ministry. Do not worry, however, because a very expensive risk assessment is currently underway that will mathematically minimize health considerations to an acceptable level. Risk assessments are the polluter's best friend. Has there been any other dangerous chemicals either produced or in use over the decades at Uniroyal, Crompton, Comtura, or Lanxess that could and will affect new neighbors? There was a serious fire in a building beside a tank farm on the Uniroyal site back in the 1990s. At a public UPAC meeting, I asked the then general manager of Uniroyal Chemical, David Ash, as to whether a chemical, possibly toluene diisocyanate, TDI, stored nearby had the potential to be lethal if exposed to heat or fire. Dr. Ash's response was stunning at a public meeting. Dr. Ash assured me that yes, TDI was more toxic here in Elmira that they had on site than its chemical cousin, which was the chemical that killed thousands at Union Carbide in India in the 1980s. The good news, he told me, however, is that the more toxic chemical here in Elmira, TDI, was less volatile than the one in India. By less volatile, he meant that the chemical here would volatilize from a liquid to a gas more slowly and hence be airborne and kill slower and less efficiently than the one in Bhopal, India. I do not know what chemicals in the future Lanxess will use or bring to Elmira. Do you Woolwich councillors seriously think that the company will ask your permission prior to bringing in new chemicals? I think not. On page 13 of the Woolwich Development Services Staff Report, a Woolwich employee states, quote, "In summary, the Hawk Ridge lands are designated and zoned for residential, and there are other residential lands in similar proximity, so there is no further encroachment of the residential land use," unquote. This Woolwich planner is actually admitting the obvious, that any residential homes beside or close to a chemical factory, much less two chemical factories, are an encroachment because they do not belong there. Additional homes where they do not belong, according to him, are not a further encroachment. Your planner is wrong. He is plain wrong. Additional homes are an encroachment. Lastly, we must ask the question as to what level of confidence we have in this corporation. I'm specifically referring to Lanxess, always being honest and forthright with both citizens and Woolwich councillors. I can tell you that their neighbor has done an excellent job for at least 2 decades, and I would not criticize the neighbor's attempts and the neighbor's serious outlook and serious work that they have done. However, the answer to the question about Lanxess or Uniroyal being honest and forthright, the answer is that none of the corporate iterations to date have felt compelled to always speak honestly and forthrightly. I will be sending an email copy of this delegation to Woolwich councillors. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Alan. Councillors, any questions for Alan Marshall? Don't see any, so thank you very much for the presentation. We will move to our final delegation on this topic. Ron Cognac. Ron, are you there? Can you hear us?
I am here.
There you are. Thank you very much. Feel free to begin whenever you're ready. Your time won't begin until you begin, and I'll give you a 1-minute warning when you reach the 9-minute mark.
Thank you. So I'll start first. My name is Ron Conich. I'm the president of CCC Sulfur Products. So I'm really submitting the viewpoint on the Hawk Ridge subdivision as it pertains to CCC Sulfur Products, also known synonymously as Sulco Chemicals. And I'll use those synonymously as I go through here. So Sulco is located at 61st Street extension. We are 102 meters away from the Hawk Ridge proposed subdivision, immediately adjacent to the sewage treatment plant. So as I sit and sift through all the information that has been presented from 2011 forward, there's this frustration that builds and begs the question as to why all the parties just can't work together up front, as opposed to the approach that is developed here in trying to rush a detailed review and decision through. Sulco is completely open, highly regarded member of the Township of Woolwich, and has presented information on the subdivision both in 2012, 16, 19, and again now in 2020. Sulco co-chairs the community awareness and emergency response group within the township and routinely discusses our future direction with the community advisory panel. You may have seen our recent announcement in the local papers of the installation of a steam turbine in the upcoming months. This project was all openly vetted through the community advisory panel to allow us to make the proper decisions for the project. I just wish this openness on information sharing would have been evident from Hawk Ridge from the beginning. There was a comment in the RWDI noise assessment report that indicated Sulco would not partake in the noise studies. Well, this couldn't be further from the truth, as we have a very high interest in making sure these results are correct. That being said, there was an element of information sharing that resulted in a very positive change. The movement of Block 37 to be moved to commercial development, and we thank the township for tightening the Hawk Ridge submission in this regard. Now, I've routinely stayed in touch with Jeremy Vink on this process no less than a dozen times since 2015. However, I am appalled that Sulco has been shut out of the process over the last 18 months, despite these continuous contact efforts. The first I heard of something transpiring again is the notice out there that came out for the meeting from November 4th regarding this upcoming meeting. This is not really how I would have expected that we should have been notified. Quite frankly, we've been given 1 week to review the current situation. We have two concerns that have yet to be adequately addressed and think we owe this to everyone involved to ensure the right decision is being made. From the report before the committee, the township has delegated the responsibility of land use compatibility study to the region of Waterloo. I have since sent my concerns to the region. However, their first contact back to me was at 2:39 this afternoon. So this email from the region did apologize for the delay in the response. However, needless to say, the email that I sent back to them was that much more information needs to be covered off, and a couple hours before this meeting is just not adequate time for us to respond. Now, we've talked about a few things already. Certainly the first concern, as has been highlighted already, is in the regional letter from September 20th. It highlights the sewage treatment plant under the land use compatibility section. However, there's absolutely no mention that there is that the subdivision is closer than the sewage treatment plant and is 102 meters away from our plant. So under the MECP guidelines, as already been pointed out, the recommended separation distance from a plant under our industrial classification should be determined would allow sufficient separation to allow the
I apologize for interrupting.
Pardon me?
I apologize for interrupting. There's a little bit of a lag on the internet here, and your last two sentences have been a little bit tough to hear. I was wondering if you could back up about 2 sentences and just repeat what we might have missed here.
Okay, I'll start with the first concern is relative to the regional letter, September 20th. Is that where I should start?
Is that sure? Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so the regional letter of September 20th highlights the sewage treatment plant under the land use compatibility section. However, there's no mention of our site that is closer to the subdivision, is only 102 meters away. And again, under the MECP guidelines, the recommended separation distance from a plant under our industrial classification should be 300 meters. This is the distance by which the MECP has determined would allow sufficient separation to allow the transition between incompatible land uses. What we need to know from the region and yet to be answered is how the recommended 300 meters has been reduced and that 102 meters is acceptable. I ask that the committee defer any decision today in order for Sulco to confirm the outstanding issues with the region so that our consultant can review this information. This decision will have a very long-lasting impact, not only on our plant, but any new Hawk Ridge neighbor. Let's make sure that we're making all information available to satisfy all parties. Secondly, on the noise issue, there's been a wide range of noise values for railcar shunting floating around since 2011. And I agree that there's been many changes since our report in 2011 and the Hawk Ridge report in 2016. Quite frankly, I was not aware of the update in 2020. That's news to me this evening. In fact, I think on the website, the latest report was 2016 still. So namely, the changes that have taken place since these reports that have been put in place is CN has now taken over operation of the rail line. That happened in November 2018, operating with different equipment and procedures from the previous GEXR operation. Secondly, the shunting that occurs has already been pointed out by a few of the councillors already, takes place between midnight and 4 a.m. And lastly, since 2011, Sulco volumes have more than doubled and a 33% increase since the RWDI report in 2016. We now total 25 rail cars a week. So the question of the region has been to ensure that the current actual noise data, not the textbook data that has been supplied in the RWDI reports, also falls within acceptable limits of the new subdivision. Currently, the textbook levels that the RWDI is used is 110 decibels. However, the actual data that we have collected has been in the range of 118 and 130.8. There's no certainty that these lower RWDI textbook levels can be achieved under the increased volumes and change back to CN operations, recognizing that we have data that doesn't support the 110. Would it not be prudent to us to agree and assess that some actual data points be collected? Either that or use the existing points that we have. When the noise complaints begin to come in, and by the way, I will highlight these noise complaints, highly unlikely they're going to come into the township as a first measure. I can tell you we get complaints now out of Waterloo for trains coming into Elmira. But when the noise complaints do come in, you think it's going to be sufficient for us to tell the neighbors that the textbook said you should be okay? Isn't it the real data that we should be talking about and making sure that those are in compliance? So based on these issues on the land use compatibility and the confirmation of actual noise levels meeting the new subdivision design, I'm asking again that you defer the decision until SALCO can confirm with the region that they have also included the best interests of our plant operation in their assessment. I am estimating that the deferral could take up till June 30th, 2021. As indicated, I've asked the region these questions specifically, but as you can appreciate, with a very limited contact this afternoon, this communication has just begun. Now, one thing I did learn today from the region is that the only noise assessment considered in the most recent regional assessment was the 2016 RWDI report. It was more than a little shocking to learn this afternoon that our noise data submitted in the past has not been considered. We ask ourselves why. This is a grave concern that the actual data is missing from the analysis. In the event the committee does not agree that we should defer this decision to ensure that we have adequate answers back from the region, I would certainly encourage you to review the noise clause intended to be included in the title of the property. Now, I'm not going to go through the actual noise clause that's inserted there, but certainly what's missing is the eliminated part here is that the rail switching takes place between midnight and 4 a.m. I think it's critical that the residents are aware of that the interference here is their sleep between midnight and 4 a.m. The time of the train switching is a critical part of the clause that any prospective purchaser should be aware of. Now, with the limited feedback again this afternoon that I did get from the region, is that the region is open to updating the clause that you see in front of you. So again, another positive.
Rod, you're at 10 minutes. I want to give you a little bit extra time because we did have that delay and I did interrupt you, but we're at 10 now. So if you could wrap it up here briefly, that'd be great, please.
Well, good. I'm on the last little bit here, and it's again just reiterating, and I'll just conclude that I'm just asking the committee to defer to the decision tonight so we can have the opportunity to address the land use compatibility issues with the region. And certainly that given that the region or the township has delegated those responsibilities over to the region, we see no push to push this decision through this evening. And certainly something SALCO would be happy to work along with the development. Given that the development really discussions has taken place over the last 18 months, asking for another 7 months for SALCO to look at that, I don't think is anything unrealistic. Anyways, if you can provide us some additional time, it would be certainly appreciated from our end. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Mr. Konyich. Council, any questions for the delegation? Councilor Merlehan.
Yeah, through you, Chair McMillan, to Mr. Connick. First of all, congratulations on your priorities there to reduce your environmental footprint in Elmira. I appreciate that, especially in light of some of the environmental concerns that have been coming towards Woolwich Council the last couple of years. But in this particular issue, can you provide just a little bit more specific detail on some of the impacts that you think SALCO will have because of the decision tonight? You mentioned long-lasting impacts to your company. If you could just elaborate on what kinds of things you see as potential problems.
Yeah, sure. So let's, probably the biggest one is noise. So on this new project that we put through, which is taking the turbine and generating electricity, normally we would have had to meet the current existing residential area. And that changes as the residence encroaches onto our property, the results and modifications that we need to make to our process changes. And I think we all know that things don't get any easier. So what are things going to look like 5 years down the road, or 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road? We're in this for the long haul, and we're deeply concerned that things will change. Certainly, we know the noise issues related to rail. That is something that's out of our control. It's one thing to control what's happening on your property, but once the rail shunting gets out onto the main line, that quite frankly, like I said, is beyond our control. And we're concerned. We are a very good neighbor, and we're going to take these complaints serious. But at the same time, I don't know what the resolution is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Shantz, did I see you put your hand up? Councillor Shantz?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, and I think this would be maybe for Mr. Vink. The MECP 300-meter minimum distance. Can you elaborate on that, or do you have any information on that?
I'm assuming you're referring to the sewage treatment plant question and the location that was raised, or just to clarify?
Yeah, from what I understand, there's a minimum distance requirement between a plant like that and residential.
Yep. So through you, Mr. Chair. So yes, similar to heavy industrial uses, sewage treatment plants have a recommended separation distance of 300 meters. Okay, that's under, just generally speaking, that's a guideline that they try to keep them. Here we've been, like I mentioned, they went through the studies and reports to deal with mitigation to reduce those separations. So what you're here referring to is the region gave formal comments and cleared the subdivision. They had no further concerns, and they have reiterated that to us today, that they're satisfied with the reports and the peer reviews and the noise study. They have no further issues outstanding. But they did at one point, because township staff was going through the reports and realized they hadn't made any comment about the sewage treatment plant in their regional comments. So we had asked the region to clarify if there was any outstanding issues. So they did give us a supplemental letter, and that's why it came out separately. It just that they referred to the sewage treatment plant separately and said, yes, they did need a warning clause. They had no concerns, there was no issues, but they just needed the warning clause in there. So that's why it came out slightly separately from everything else. But they did look at compatibility. And I just want to declare it, it's not the township that gives the region authority. The region is given authority by the province of Ontario to review these reports. So the region did review all those compatibility, including noise, dust, and odor for the chemical industries, as well as they did look at their own sewage treatment plant. And that's where that reduction comes down.
If I could just do a follow-up then, how do you mitigate a distance that is required? I don't understand that. I can understand it with noise, but how do you mitigate something like that that's set up to be 300 meters away? You can't change that distance. So what do you do in the meantime?
So through Mr. Chair, it's not that you can't mitigate. That's the recommended distance, is a guideline. So they just reviewed the site, given the general setup of the operations, the distance that's there, the way the plant functions. They had no concerns that 100 meters would be okay, and the wind directions are generally the other way. So there'd be minimal odor issues that they anticipate. So that's why they recommended just the warning clause. So there was no concerns from the region.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Council? Councilor Merleham?
Yeah, through you, Chair, to Mr. Vink. A number of years ago, Council did a bit of a drive-by tour and we took a little bus around and got out and looked at certain areas of future development. In this particular case, we stopped and just in front of Sulco, there's and fronting onto Union is like a vacant piece of land. And I don't recall if that's municipal land or if that's Sulco property. But as far as one of the mitigation that we kind of talked about a bit was perhaps putting a berm and perhaps Hawkridge, creating that berm on that site to mitigate more sound and maybe visuals. Was that ever looked at in this regard on the application?
So for you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Merlihan, not being on the bus and part of that conversation, I had no knowledge of that conversation. I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't know that was any conversation. So no, it wasn't considered, but normally we wouldn't do mitigation measures on another property. We deal with on the property that we're working on, right? So you could do it directly at the source if the applicant's willing. Let's say Wasalco was willing to deal with things at the source. That's the better location. But we didn't look at any intervening properties to do that, nor is the recommendation reports then that were provided by the applicant suggesting that we need to do that level. There's nothing suggesting we need to go to that level to add more berming or anything like that. Noise wall should be sufficient along with the other requirements about the house design. So that would just add more work and cost to something that's not required at this time.
Okay, but that could potentially be an issue if there is noise concerns in the future with increased activity on commercial sites, industrial sites, sorry.
Yes, that would be an option, could be an option, but like I say, it's better to do it closer to the source. So it might even make more sense to have the noise wall probably, or something along closer to the tracks, even just to make the noise go completely away. So rather than an intervening property.
Okay, thanks. Just my final comment, and I won't say anything more on this. I can understand Mr. Connick's concern as being a longstanding company in Elmira. And you can look to different areas in Elmira, and I think about where Elmira Pet Food Plant is. They were there first, and subdivisions moved in beside them, and there's been issues with odor, particulates, lots of odor smells over the last 40 years. So I can understand his concern, and I think it's a legitimate concern for his company to not be dealing with a whole lot of complaints in the future. So I'm wondering if the wording to the residents can be maybe a little bit more, I don't know, strengthened. I mean, I hope that all their rights aren't written away by agreeing to buy the home, but I think there needs to be some acknowledgement that the companies were there first and have been operating as good corporate citizens, and we brought problems closer to them. So I don't know how that can be done, but I'm sure some sort of lawyer or something could make that happen.
Okay, council, if there's no other questions for the delegation or for Mr. Vink, item 7.4 has a staff report. That staff report has a recommendation. Would anybody care to act on that recommendation? Councilor Martin had his hand up first.
I did. I said I'll move it.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay. So, sorry, Councilor Martin, I misunderstood. I thought you wanted to talk. The rare politician who doesn't take the opportunity to talk.
I can make some comments.
Councilor Martin has moved the recommendation as written. Would somebody care to second that? I don't see anyone else seconding it. So with that, would there be somebody else that would like to do something? Mayor Shantz.
Yeah, thank you. First, I'd like to say that the plan is getting better. as I see the concessions that have been made and some of the changes that have been made. But I would like to see a little more conversation happen between Silco and the township and the developer to work out some of the issues that were brought here today. So I would recommend deferring this. I'm not prepared to turn it down in its entirety. I think that, you know, it's there for development. So I would like to defer it and ask for staff to work with the two parties to resolve some of those outstanding issues.
So a motion from Mayor Shantz to defer. Councillor Merlahan?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, one thing I'd like to ask staff about that motion before we get going is, do we need a time frame on that? Mayor Shantz, would you like to put a time frame on that? Would staff, would it help? Is that something that would be beneficial in this case? Mr. Venk, is there something that with the motion to defer, would a time frame be helpful?
I'm not sure it's necessary. I would just caution that 7 months is an extremely long period of time. Given the standard time frame for a Planning Act process is 120 days that we're supposed to follow, so 7 months seems a little long. So I would say we would leave it to try and resolve it, to work with something, but it would not, I could not see that it should take 7 months. I would be expecting that hopefully we could, you know, they could rerun some modeling maybe or something that maybe satisfies thing within the next month or two, and we could be back to council early next year. But I'm not sure we need a deferral time at this point.
If you don't need a time frame, the mayor didn't give one with her original motion, and it is seconded, so I think we're probably best to proceed. Mayor Shantz, do you agree? Yep. So there is a motion to defer on the table. It's been seconded. Would anyone like to speak to the motion? Councilor Merlahan?
Sorry, just quickly. I'm with Mr. Vink that I don't think this should take a lot of time and a lot of negotiation. When I asked Mr. Kunik about the long-lasting impacts that he saw, it was mostly related to noise. So for me, if they could talk about wording and with residents, and if there was some more noise mitigation, I would be satisfied with that. But I don't think we need a long time.
Okay, motion to defer. It's on the Mayor Shantz to speak to the motion. No problem.
No, I'm not, I've been rethinking the date, and I think putting some kind of an end date on it would be beneficial for the developer. I don't think they want to have it sort of open-ended. So I would, based on Mr. Vink's comments and Mr. Konich's comments, I'd split the difference and go March 31st.
March 31st. For staff to report back to council by March 31st. It's a friendly amendment of your own motion. Councilor Merlahan, you seconded. Are you okay with that friendly amendment to?
I could, but I hope it wouldn't delay, I hope it wouldn't delay construction season because of the wait. I was thinking more like January, right, kind of first of the year, but whatever Mr. Vink can do.
Yeah, and I think Mayor Shantz, the March 31st doesn't say that it has to be March 31st. It would be like that's the end point, and I think Mr. Vink is talking about it taking less time than that. So I think we're all on board here with that. If everybody's okay, Councilor Merlahan, are you okay with that? March 31st, understanding that's the deadline and not the goal. Okay. So friendly amendment to the motion, motion to defer and have staff report back to council by March 31st, 2021 at the latest.
Larry also got his hand up.
Yes. So now that is the motion that's on the floor, friendly amendment, Councilor Shantz.
Yeah, and I guess I caution that if the region is involved, that might drag things on a bit too. So we'll have to put some pressure on the region to make sure that they get their information back and get involved sooner than later.
Excellent. So the motion's on the floor. It's seconded. Anyone last call to speak to it? No, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That motion to defer is carried. Excellent. I got a note here from Mr. Brenneman that says one of the counselors needs a bathroom break, but I didn't see anybody talking to him. So I think it's him that needs it. And he's trying to blame it on somebody else. But we are going to take, let's take a 5-minute break, stretch your legs, and we'll be back here in 5 minutes.
Just a reminder, we're still recording.
We're still recording?
Yes,
Okay.
so
Take your mics off before
Take
you
your
go to the
mics
bathroom. Where was that? A reporter. It was one of the press conferences.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Thanks.
Okay, stop talking about Councilor Merlehan. The mic's back on. Okay, everybody's back. We're all back. Councilor Shawns, Councilor Redicott. Excellent. So moving on, we have item 7.5, the Peel Street Bridge Municipal Class Environmental Assessment. And we have Ryan here to recommend or to introduce the report, and there's a recommendation in that report.
Thank you, Chair McMillan. Can I get my presentation up on the screen? Is that possible? Perfect. Thank you. Great. The Peel Street Bridge represents the last of 3 historic steel truss structures within the township that were reviewed through the environmental assessment process. Councils of Woolwich and Centre Wellington made the decision to remove the steel truss bridge located on Middlebrook Place, and the Glasgow Street South Bridge in Conestoga is scheduled for rehabilitation starting in 2021, which was made possible through an upper government grant of over $1 million. These structures have required difficult decisions, and staff have tried to balance the historic nature of the Peel Street structure, wants of the community based on comments received, along with the township's current revenue allotment for its infrastructure needs when determining the preferred solution presented to council tonight. Staff understands the community's desire to retain the historic Peel Street structure and continued recreation and transportation use, as it does provide a river crossing within the area that is not dependent on regional roads. As a result, staff's recommendation has been carefully thought through to try to balance all the issues and allow an opportunity for the bridge to be utilized again in the future should adequate funding become available. Next slide, please. So we're just this is just a brief agenda. I'll just go through the study objectives, the problem and opportunity statement for the environmental assessment, public and agency consultation, existing conditions of the structure, the alternative solutions that were reviewed, how we evaluated those alternative solutions, the recommended solution in front of council tonight, and then the next steps for the EA process. Next slide, please. The township originally began the Peel Street environmental assessment as a Schedule C environmental assessment due to the potential for the preferred option to cost more than $2.4 million. Due to staff's recommended preferred option being less than the $2.4 million, the schedule was adjusted to a Schedule B in October of this year. As with any environmental assessment, staff have tried to consider a reasonable number of potential solutions. Studies have also been undertaken to determine impacts to multiple environment types, including social, cultural, technical, economic, as well as the natural environment. The decision-making process for the EA is laid out in the following decision matrices. Public participation was also encouraged throughout the environmental assessment process. Next slide, please. The Peel Street Bridge is currently closed due to its deteriorated structural condition. Since the structure is over 100 years old, repairs to the structure will become more frequent and costly. The bridge provides recreation and transportation uses to the surrounding community. Due to the structure's type and age, it has significant documented built heritage value. Staff have tried to balance the assessment criteria to aid in determining the short-term and long-term plans for the structure. Unfortunately, funding was a major contributor to the preferred solution being presented to council this evening. Next slide, please. So this was the study area. Basically, it's Winterburn, Catherine Street. The bridge is just west, located on Peel Street, and it does cross the Grand River. Next slide, please. As you can see from the photo, the Peel Street Bridge spans the Grand River in Winterburn, approximately 600 meters west of Catherine Street. It is a single lane, dual span, pin-connected camelback truss that is approximately 95 meters in length. The bridge was constructed in 1913 by an unknown builder. Next slide, please. An enhanced Ontario structure inspection manual and low limit review were completed for the structure in 2017, just prior to its closure. The inspection determined that the structure was unsafe for use and it was closed as a result. As you can see from the photos, the bridge has some major issues, including severely corroded stringers with complete section loss. That's the middle picture, basically both the middle pictures there. Deflected members due to overloading of the structures, that's bottom left-hand corner. As well as failure of multiple connection points. So that's top left, bottom right, and the roller pins is the top right. So those have become dislodged as well. So as you can see, the bridge is in bad shape, unfortunately. Next slide, please. So the project started in February of 2018. We held 2 public consultation centers, one in May of 2018 and one in December of 2018. The notice of study schedule change was sent out in October of this year once the preferred alternative was chosen by staff. Staff consulted with various agencies throughout the project, including federal, regional, and municipal government, Aboriginal communities, conservation authorities, and utility companies. Staff also received comments from regional and township heritage committees, the Ontario Federation of Snowmobile Clubs, Cycle Waterloo Region, as well as the local Mennonite community. Next slide, please. Staff hosted 2 public consultation centers for the project, one at the administration building in Elmira and the second at the Foundation Christian School in Winterburn. The events were well attended and over 95 participants signed the attendance sheets. During both PCCs, the preferred solution presented was closure. Staff received over 70 separate comments on the project through email, comment sheets, and letters. Almost all of the feedback received did not agree with the preferred solution of closure. Most comments spoke to maintaining access across the river for at a minimum horse and buggy and pedestrian traffic. Another frequent comment was about the recreational use of the structure for walking and cycling. Also, the views of the Grand River from the bridge, as well as its use for snowmobiles. The heritage value of the structure was another frequent comment due to the structure's type and age, as well as its documentation on historic bridge websites. Following the second public consultation center, a petition was presented to council in April of 2019, where residents requested further transportation analysis, more community consultation, as well as consultation with other municipalities who have chosen to rehabilitate historic structures. Next slide, please. So staff explored 7 main alternative solutions to the project. Do nothing was not carried forward as an option, as it eventually leads to one of the other alternatives. The second alternative reviewed was closure of the bridge, which was presented as the preferred short-term solution to council tonight. The closure would require the installation of turnaround areas on either end of the bridge to provide safe areas for snowplows and other vehicles to safely turn around. Due to the built heritage value of the structure, council may choose to keep the bridge in place as a monument, but that is not part of staff's recommendation tonight. Remove bridge without replacement is similar to the closure option, but would be implemented in a shorter time frame. Staff would still work to determine if there are opportunities to salvage part of the bridge for other uses, and plan to have a plaque commemorating the structure installed at the site. Rehabilitate bridge for pedestrian use would remove the vehicular access to the structure through the installation of turnarounds again. The bridge deck may also be modified to ensure that pedestrian loading is reduced, and this will also extend the useful life of the structure. Next slide, please. Rehabilitate for vehicular use, 8-ton load limit would allow for passenger vehicles and lightly loaded trucks to utilize the structure. Most farm equipment would be too heavy to use the bridge, and there is a potential for the structure to be overloaded, as has happened in the past. Replace bridge for vehicle use was the most expensive option explored and would provide a new 2-lane structure built to current standards. Staff would explore the potential to salvage pieces of the original structure for incorporation into the design of the new bridge. The last option explored was replace bridge for pedestrian use, and that would remove the existing structure and replace it with a pedestrian-only bridge. Again, formal turnaround areas would be required to allow safe egress of the area for snowplows and other vehicles. Next slide, please. So these 7 alternatives that were reviewed were reviewed against the typical environmental assessment criteria of social, cultural, natural environment, technical, and economic. And I'll discuss each in detail in the following slides. Next slide, please. The social review of the alternatives focus on how each alternative impacts the local population. Some of the issues reviewed included the loss of recreation use if the structure was to be removed, as well as the alternative routes that the community could utilize to cross the Grand River. Staff did have some concerns with the feedback received as the currently closed structure is still being used, which is a potential health and safety issue for the township. Next slide, please. So the preferred solution based on the social environmental review was rehabilitate for vehicular. So again, this it shows it's ranked number 1 because there's basically no property issues. It's short-term or medium-term duration impacts during construction. It increases public health and safety for all the users, and it also maintains the outward appearance due to the sympathetic design. So that's why that was ranked number 1. Next slide, please. Okay, the cultural review of the alternatives looked at the built heritage of the structure as well as potential impacts to Indigenous communities. As the structure is over 100 years old and is the only dual-span camelback Pratt-style truss bridge within the region, it has significant built heritage. The bridge was also painted by a local artist, Peter Ettrell Snyder, in 1997. Other municipalities in Ontario, including the Township of Woolwich, have recently spent capital money to keep historic structures in place. London's Blackfriars Bridge is an example where the city chose to rehabilitate the structure for pedestrian use. And that's the center picture there. That's them actually dismantling that bridge. Unfortunately, in the case of the Blackfriars Bridge, the project came in almost $4 million over the original estimate. The City of Cambridge has also chosen to convert the Black Bridge Road Bridge to a pedestrian bridge, and will be constructing a new bridge north of the existing bridge at a cost of approximately $6 million. That's the graphic at the top there. You can see the original bridge below, and then the new road planned to the north there. The Township of Woolwich will also be rehabilitating the Glasgow Street South Bridge, which is planned for 2021. Next slide, please. So in this instance, rehabilitate for vehicular again was the preferred alternative based on the cultural environmental review. And this is basically because it maintains the cultural heritage of the structure, and there's basically no impacts to archaeological resources. So that's why, again, it was ranked number 1. Next slide, please. The review of the natural environment criteria ranked all of the options the same, as there are mitigation measures that can be implemented for all options to ensure that the natural environment is protected. So this, again, all the options here are ranked the same. So we'll just move on to the next slide. The low limit that the Peel Street Bridge was rated to prior to closure was 3 tones. Staff have recommended increasing the low limit to a more realistic of 8 tones, which would allow for passenger vehicles as well as some lightly loaded delivery vehicles. Most farm equipment would be too heavy to utilize the structure, especially if they were hauling any loads. Staff were able to determine that prior to the closure that approximately 11% of the use of the structure was for horse and buggy traffic, which was inferred based on previous traffic counts. I would like to bring to Council's attention that recent discussions with our consultant, GM Blue Plan, have raised concerns that the structure might not be able to be upgraded to 8 tones. GM Blue Plan is currently undertaking the detailed design for the Glasgow Street South Bridge and has concerns due to the Peel Street Bridge being in worse condition than that bridge. The Peel Street Bridge is also 15 meters longer than the Glasgow Street Bridge. As tendering for the rehabilitation, the Glasgow Street Bridge is anticipated for Q1 of 2021. The bids received will provide a window of what can be expected if a rehabilitation of the Peel Street Bridge is to be undertaken. Next slide, please. So in this scenario, replace for vehicular was the preferred alternative based on the technical review. So if you put a new bridge in, you can build it to current standards. It's going to allow any traffic on it. There'll be no load limits, and it can be constructed to current standards. So that's why it was chosen as number 1. Next slide, please. Township currently has an annual budget of approximately $1.5 million to maintain over 50 structures across the township. Rehabilitation of the Peel Street Bridge would utilize at least a full year's budget if no other funding is available. Staff have applied for potential upper government funding through the National Trust for Canada's Shovel Ready Heritage Program. Next slide, please. So the preferred solution for the economic environment was removal, and that again comes down to costs. Once the structure, or if the structure was to be removed, that basically is the last financial commitment the township would have at that point. So that is why it was ranked number 1. Next slide, please. So in summary, closure, removal, and rehabilitate for vehicular vehicles were all highly ranked when reviewing the alternatives. Staff have recommended closure for the short-term recommended solution and removal or rehabilitation as the long-term recommendation. Next slide, please. Although the ultimate recommendation is closure of the structure with eventual removal when the structure is no longer deemed safe, Council does have the option of keeping the bridge in place as a monument, but this does have long-term financial impacts. If the bridge is to remain closed, the township would need to install turnaround areas at either end of the bridge to allow for the safe turning of snowplows and other vehicles. If funding is made available for the structure, staff would recommend upgrading the load limit to 8 tones if possible, which would need to be verified through detailed design. If the bridge is to be removed, Council may be interested in installing a lookout area in one of the existing abutments to allow for views of the Grand River. Next slide, please. So based on Council's ultimate direction, which we formalized on December 1st, the next steps for the project would be to file the notice of study completion and open the project file for a 30-day public review period. Following the public review period, the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks has also implemented an internal 30-day review before the EA can be considered final. So with that, I will take any questions that Council has.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tucker. Council, any questions for staff? Councilor Shantz?
Yes, thank you through you to Mr. Tucker. If we go, can we go back to slide 22? Is that possible? Question I have is, as we were going through that, it looked like there was about 3 in a row that suggested that keeping it open to vehicular traffic, I think it was ranked number 1. But that slide shows that there's only one, I think, spot that was ranked there. So just have a question on that. Yeah, so we have 2 there that are ranked to keep it open for vehicular traffic, but I thought there was a couple other ones that were suggesting that was number 1 as well. Is that not right?
Through you, Chair McMillan, to you, Councillor Shantz. I believe that this is correct as it is shown. The social and cultural rank for rebuilt to vehicular were number 1, but there was no other, it was not ranked really high with the other technical and economic ranks. They were all ranked number 1 for natural ranks, so that's just been left out here.
Okay, and then the other question I have is with your key components, I think on your report on page number 3, it talks about the key component being public input. And I think your report says that there was 70 comments and most of them were to keep it open. What point do we have that as the determining factor compared to cost?
Yeah, through you, Chair McMillan, to you, Councillor Shantz. Like I said in my report, the comments received were overwhelmingly in support of keeping the bridge. Unfortunately, staff have to make a recommendation for the structure, and without a funding source, it's difficult for staff to make a recommendation to keep a structure. So I think we've tried to balance the options as much as possible by leaving the window open, as you could say, to keep the bridge and restore it should funding become available. It's just, like I said, staff can't recommend something without a defined funding source. So that is why we've tried to keep the window open. We're not recommending, this bridge needs to go tomorrow, but certainly it needs to be closed right now because people are using it in an inappropriate fashion and it's not safe. But like I said in the report, if funding becomes available and staff have applied for upper government funding, that we would recommend the rehabilitation at that point.
So one final question, if I may. So if I'm understanding that correctly, if money was not an issue, the recommendation would be to keep the bridge there.
Through you, Chairman Miller, to you, Councillor Shantz, that would be staff's recommendation if money was not an option.
Thank you.
Mayor Shantz?
Is there a way to mitigate the issues with keeping the bridge open short term? For foot traffic or for some minor, I understand that there's some issues with it, but is there a way to keep it open in the shorter term and still maintain some amount of safety?
Through Chair McMillan to Mayor Shantz. Unfortunately, the assessment that was done on the bridge, and you've seen the photos, it's in bad shape. The bridge has been closed since 2017. There is a potential that it could fail. So that's why staff are recommending that, depending on council's decision tonight, that we implement some sort of program to keep people off the bridge until we can ensure that it is safe.
Councilor Merlehan?
Yeah, through you, Chair, to Ryan. There was a mention of perhaps selling the bridge to the Mennonite community, but I'm just wondering, was there any exploration of the public purchasing it for $1 or taking some of the money that we would have to use to take it down, use some of that money to give towards getting it to a certain level for the public to take on. I don't know, there was some comments on people's letters and such that would be interested in finding funding sources and such. Can you tell me if that's a realistic option for the township?
Through Chair McMillan to Councillor Merlihan. Staff did explore that option of selling the structure to a third party. Unfortunately, there's a lot of liability that comes with that because our infrastructure leads up to the bridge. So unfortunately, we can't pull back Peel Street. So if something happened to the bridge and it was owned by a third party, there's always potential that it would come back and the township would be named in a legal suit. So staff would not. We did get an opinion from the insurance pool, and based on that, we would not recommend selling the structure to a third party.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else, council? We do have some delegates on this issue. So if there are no other questions, I will move to the delegations. First of all, let me thank all of the delegations. It's now 10:15. You've been hanging in here for 3 hours now. So thank you very much for your patience. Kim Hodgson, are you there? Kim, can you hear us? I think maybe we'll give Kim another chance.
Hi there, I'm right here.
Oh, you are there, okay.
I am there, yes. My eyes are somewhat closed, but I'm here.
Thank you, Kim. I'm not sure if you were around earlier when we were instructing to the other delegations. You are limited to 10 minutes here tonight. When you get to your 9th minute, I will let you know that you've got 1 minute left. And then we have a chance for council to ask questions of the delegations after. So begin when you're ready. Your time won't start until you start.
All right, thank you, Chair McMillan and Mayor Shantz, councillors, good evening. It has been a long night already. I've learned lots about MIRAC and all the complex decision-making that you're making. Actually, I think that my presentation tonight might actually be a little bit shorter, which is good news because thankfully your staff, Ryan Tucker, we agree on many things. We agree on the significant heritage evaluation of our bridge. And I call it our bridge because we're very possessive of it. It's part of our community. We love it. But I'm going to talk about 3 things. I'm going to talk about the heritage element very, very briefly because it's been covered in depth. It's very nice to see that amount of detail in your presentation, Mr. Tucker. I do appreciate that. I'm going to talk about the whole idea of it being a core public service as opposed to a nice to have. It is a have to have in our community, just like any other bridge in your communities. This bridge is part of our infrastructure. And then I'm going to talk about a little bit of the community consultation. And then we'll go on from there. So I'll try to be brief. Next slide, please. Thank you. So as you can tell by the amount of feedback that you've had, either at the public consultation or since, this is clearly a valuable community asset here in Winterburn. Its heritage, not designation, but its heritage value is, it's on your website. You've got pictures of it. You've described the bridge. The Wilder Region has it in their books. Famous painters have painted it. And even when I reached out to the owner of the US website, heritagebridges.com, and let him know what was going on, he kindly gave me permission this evening to read what he said. And he said, "This is devastating news that this is one of the rarest bridges in Ontario, due to the fact that multi-span truss bridges are uncommon, pin-connected trusses are rare, and camelback trusses with pin connections are very rare." So for those engineers in the crowd, that likely will mean more to you than me. However, we love our Iron Lady. To continue, I heard the Chalmers Bridge was also slated for demolition, which only increases the rarity of the large and more significant Winterburn Bridge. Are they not replacing the bridge? They just want to demolish the Winterburn Bridge for the sake of scrapping it? Of course not, but why not leave it standing in place for pedestrian use? Even fencing it off to pedestrians and leaving it standing as a non-functional monument would be better than demolishing the bridge. Pedestrian use or monumenting, interesting verb, the bridge would have much lower maintenance costs than keeping it open for motorized traffic. I'd be happy to write a letter of support or anything else you think might be helpful. And that was read with permission of Nathan Holt, who has obviously a keen international interest in bridges. So he felt the need to reach out when I contacted him on his website. So I suppose when I first got the EA assessment, and you know, a one pager doesn't do justice to all the work that's been done behind the scenes. And you see that the recommendation, which is a little bit confusing because it says remove/rehabilitate. So I think there's a clarity issue there that you might have to look into. But you see something to be removed from your community that you love when you don't have a whole lot of assets to begin with. So we got a kind of a double-edged sword here that we're dealing with. But back to the question, the slide at hand. So the heritage and the, you know, tourism, if you will, value of the bridge is well stated. I'm not going to dwell on that. Next slide, please, Alex. Okay, then we talked about transportation. So let me just be really clear from our community's perspective that when you talk about selling the bridge off, you know, in the conversations that I've just heard, or selling to the Mennonites, or, you know, what can we do? This is a core piece of infrastructure in our community. It's not a nice to have thing that we, you know, our neighbors use this to get from one place to the other. You know, we use it for biking and hiking and forms of recreation. We used to use it to get over to Northfield, but we quickly have adapted in our cars to go around. But I don't know many people who haven't mentioned, okay, what is the impact on the Mennonite population on those cold days riding in their buggies when this is closed, and how much farther do they have to go around? So Cindy Weber is going to very ably speak to the comments that she's been given authority to speak on behalf of the Mennonite community, so I'll let her touch on that. So yeah, lots of horse and buggy traffic, local residents, pedestrian use, cycling, hiking, all those things that Ryan has mentioned in his presentation. So I'm glad to see it there. Other uses like snowmobiling, I'm glad that apparently you reached out to those folks. I hadn't seen that in the initial community consultation. Next slide, please. Okay, so it's also a valuable community asset for the reason that Winterburn, and I'll show you a map in a minute, but I know you know where we are, but we don't have any amenities. We were lucky, thanks to the hard work of Councillor Marie Martin many years ago, the township was able to pay for a playground. We can use that. It's on private property, but we have access to that piece of equipment after school and on weekends. But that's all that we have. There has not been investment in Winterburn that I can see. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't have a lot of other amenities. Because Catherine Street, regional road, you get lots of people going fast on there. We don't have a continuous sidewalk through the main part of our main street. So it's quite dangerous, actually. You don't take your kids on the main street in Winterburn. You walk in the residential areas, the other residential areas, but you're not going down the main street. So because of that, and because we don't have any other recreation facilities, we are forced into the countryside via that bridge. So if you've been hearing from people getting their nose out of joint, it's the fact that, we're not asking for splash pads, we're not asking for other expensive facilities, to use the ones in our neighboring community. When you're taking away things from us, that's when we're getting a little, just wondering where the equity is and how this planning goes and where money is being funded. So it feels a little bit dismissive, frankly, to say, sell it off, do this, that. We wouldn't suggest that of your infrastructure. So please be careful how you suggest that, quite frankly. So we are forced into the countryside to have some green space, to hike, to bike. We don't have a lot of other choices that other communities within the township of Woolwich have. I think that's indisputable. Next slide, please. So as you can see here, and again, I think it's great that this is a map of our township, obviously, and this is from your own website. If you can go in there, you can search where all the recreational areas are. And it's great. You can see where the majority of things are centered in Elmira, of course, and St. Jacobs. And in my background information that I read, I wasn't picking on Bloomingdale, Councillor Schatz. I was really just saying, community on the other side, we have nothing compared to communities that have many other things. So we rely on our countryside and our bridge that gets us there to recreate. So to think about taking that away, not only for the impact on our Mennonite neighbors, our kids who can't walk down the main street without thinking about getting hit. No sidewalks. I mean, you've heard this from me before. So yeah, it gets us a little upset. Next slide, please. So, and just briefly, and again, I'm hearing more from Mr. Tucker's presentation than I had before, and it's great. It was interesting. I think when I first got the EA notice, I went back to the original consultation materials and I had a look at this. So this is what was presented by staff. I didn't see all the layers, the more granular information that you saw tonight. This is the roll-up. I looked at that and I'm going, I don't think I would necessarily have ranked that in that way. And also this was presented at the community consultation. You know, here it is. What do you think? As opposed to what I typically do when I'm doing community consultation, asking communities how they feel about all these different criteria, and then putting it all together to say, this is what the community feels like, and here's our element from a planning point of view, and here's the economic element of it. But this was a bit of a fait accompli, and I'm going, this is interesting. And as I looked at the evaluation of alternatives, as Mr. Tucker correctly pointed out tonight, it's an economic driver, and it's not even economic, it's a cost factor of council as to where it wants to go. That was the driving force as to what that recommendation would be. So
You've got 1 minute left.
thank you. So let's be clear, and I think you were in the conversation. So the economic driver is one thing, and council makes the decisions to align resources with priorities. But had that not been in there, the will of the people has been fairly clear. Let's leave it at that. Next slide, please. I'll go down. So I did this, I had a little time on my hands. So I went down in terms of what are people saying? How would we rate that? So you can look at this later. And I put the economic part, obviously, from least expensive to most expensive, and rank them based on our quality of life, how we use that bridge in our Mennonite neighbors who are disproportionately impacted by the current closure of the bridge, and if it is removed, which would just be unconscionable, quite frankly. We need to look for solutions. So I'm going to leave it there. The ranking is quite different. So my final point will be is that council needs to align resources and investments equitably across the township. So using recreation as an example, that has not been happening. I do, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not, we do not have a lot of things here to not look really hard at alternative solutions to fund that bridge will be long remembered. So please, let's get creative, let's be innovative, and let's be equitable in how resources are being allocated.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kim. We appreciate your presentation. Council, do we have any questions for the delegation? I don't see any. So thank you once again for the presentation, and we will move on to our second delegate on the issue. Michelle Miller. Michelle, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Excellent. So I'm not sure if you've been paying attention, but we're keeping delegations to 10 minutes as per our bylaws. When you reach 9 minutes, I'll give you a 1 minute warning, and your time won't start until you start.
I've been a resident of Winterburn for 25 years. We are a community within a community, a rural family within a rural family, but we feel like the run of the litter because Winterburn has been given so few resources. Looking at the township budget over the last 3 years, there are no capital, operational, or programming expenditures or allocations in Winterburn. Unlike every other settlement area in Woolwich and Winterburn, residents have zero amenities. Are you still there?
We're all here. We can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, because I don't see you. Sorry. We have zero amenities. Community residents successfully lobbied township to pay for a playground, but it's on private property, which residents are able to use after school hours. But should the private school ever leave the community, we could lose our access to our only township amenity. There's been a historical lack of investment in Winterburn and it is inequitable. As an example, Bloomingdale has more amenities, community center, playground, etc. And that's according to Stats Canada. We are actually larger in population. As financial restraints continue to grow, it's increasingly important to view all decision-making and resource allocation through an equity lens. Removing the bridge furthers this inequity and disadvantages our residents. In preparation for this meeting, we collected feedback from our neighbors and our community. Repeatedly, we heard, what's the point? The township gives us nothing. Villagers feel less valued and more isolated from the larger community with each passing year. How do we strengthen communities when a community is consistently ignored? We need your help to build a better community within the larger community. Please help find a way that we can work together to save the bridge or replace it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Council, any questions for the delegation? I don't see any, so thank you once again, and we will move to Ron Craig. I see you there, Mr. Craig. Again, 10 minutes. I'll let you know when you're at your 9th minute, and your time won't begin until you begin.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair, Mayor, and councillors. Thanks for this opportunity to tell you why this river crossing is so important to folks in Winterburn and the surrounding area. I'll focus primarily on the recreational use and just briefly on the use by some of my old order neighbors. I spoke to you last year and a half ago when I presented the petition that was signed by almost every adult in Winterburn. The bridge hasn't gone away, I haven't gone away, and thankfully with COVID, you haven't gone away either. I've been a Winterburn resident for more than 4 decades. We started and raised our family here. During that time, I paid a lot of taxes, and one of the major benefits I see is the Peel Street Bridge that we've been able to use. A major recreational use is walking and running. The bridge route's used not only by local walkers and runners, but some from Conestoga, West Montrose. I've used it since I moved to Winterburn in '79. It's part of half the jogging routes I have. The use has decreased because it's difficult to get around the barriers at each end, which run from side to side, and there's steep embankments on either side, and yet people manage to get around them. During COVID, I've seen an increase in the usage by walkers in particular, but with the barriers in place, mothers with little ones walk down the barriers and turn around. Another major use in the past was snowmobiling. The bridge crossing was used by hundreds of snowmobilers from Maryhill, Breslau, Bloomingdale, Winterburn, plus West Montrose, Conestoga, even St. Jacobs and Elmira coming through. The trail was our southern access point to trails that go north, south, or northeast, west from Elmira into the Southwest Ontario network. And with the bridge closure, the trails approaching on either side of the river were closed and then discontinued. So now Winterburn snowmobilers have to trailer to get to local trails. The bicycle use continues on a limited scale. It's mainly the younger Mennonite lads that are using it because it takes some physical agility to get around the barriers. I don't use it on my bicycle route to Elmira anymore. Instead, I go up to the G2G rail trail, which is longer. And of course, fishing continues even this time of year, and canoeing in many seasons. I'd also like to briefly comment on the impact on old order neighbors across the river. I occasionally help them with hospital and medical visits. In the past, when the bridge was open, I could get to their place in a minute. Now it's a 10-kilometer or longer drive around, or they walk across the bridge and I meet them. Our immediate neighbor, Mr. Brubaker, farms a field on this side, and he has a more than 12-kilometer route when he brings his tractor around, because the old orders themselves aren't using tractors any longer on their private bridge upriver. The covered bridge in West Montrose is closed to tractors, and that means you go back up to line 86, which is pretty busy. And the same distance problem has impacted farms across the river that used to sell produce to local people. It's just too far to drive to, and some of them have discontinued their produce sales. I see the township spending millions every year maintaining recreational facilities throughout the township. And for Winterburn residents and for others, the bridge is a major part of our recreational facility. It just makes sense to maintain it and replace it when the proper time comes. Closing the bridge has already had a significant negative impact on the community. Losing it completely would exacerbate this problem. We believe we can work with council and the township to find a better solution. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Craig. Council, any questions I don't see any, so thank you very much for the presentation. And we will move to Tracy McDonald. Tracy, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you. I'm going to try to go through this as quickly as possible. I know it's been a long night for everybody. The Peel Street Bridge is much more than a postcard moment, and I personally dislike the term recreation. That word kind of speaks to more of a privilege and not a necessity. A Peel Street Bridge represents safe access, an alternative pathway from the hazardous conditions that we face daily in Winterburn. Due in large part to the extensive development in Elora, Elmira, Waterloo, and Guelph, there have been shifts in commerce and supply chains which are focused heavily on logistics. Our regional road has become a key focus area and lack of for safety in our community. I have over 20 years of experience as a material specialist, and I know firsthand that shipping routes are heavily analyzed daily and dispatchers are updated daily, and success is predicated on the speed of delivery. Every day our houses literally shake and decibel levels are so intense that we cannot leave our windows open. So let's include this reality and the lack of safety for our community as part of this decision, please. Data supports this increased traffic. What was once a village that saw hundreds of vehicles a week now experiences thousands of various types of vehicles a day. Data also supports the upward trends of speeds in excess of 70 kilometers. And while we all purchase houses in a village that is posted as 50, we are asked to tolerate and consider speeds of 60 and 70 as normal. Specifically, the data validates the safety concerns with hundreds of cars clocked at speeds greater than 90. And that speaks to the importance of the Peel Street Bridge and the reason why we feel it is so critical to maintain. Winterburn is no longer a quiet community for day trippers and residents who wish to experience a rural way of life. And that was the quote that I read 5 years ago when I moved from Waterloo to this community. Our normal and our reality is utilizing Peel Street and the bridge as an alternative to the regional road, Catherine Street. And we have, as well as others that use this area for walking and for cycling. It's a safe access route for us that links us to the back roads of our community. The bridge access is a reprieve from the bombardment of constant traffic and the excessive speeds, which truly are life-threatening. And we need to not separate these issues as we live with these issues daily. I live on Catherine Street and my kitchen window faces Cox Creek Bridge, if you see that on the map. And I can validate that an 18-wheeler and a horse and buggy cannot pass each other safely on this bridge. It is the resident of this community that needs to pull off to the side, and it is the resident that needs to seek an alternative route. I'm here tonight and I'm taking my 2 minutes to speak to that need. It's been an interesting year, and beyond COVID, we've all had a year in which the topic of equity, diversity, and inclusion has been tabled. In the boardroom, in the classroom, in the media, our leaders and their policies have been challenged to find equitable solutions. We need to prioritize people and their cultures, and we need to value our heritage and appreciate that once it's gone, it's gone. We all have a mandate to close the gap on equity. So I will wrap up my time by stating that I personally find the solution to remove the bridge dismissive. And I would go so far as to say that it validates for me a true lack of empathy. There is simply no acknowledgement that the remaining back roads of our county play a significant critical role in maintaining the integrity of the Mennonite culture and our heritage. Peel Street Bridge connects the community to the back roads, and that community, wants to come to the table to assist in cost reduction, wants to come to the table as part of the solution. Reliability can be inspected into the process, and litigation processes can be contracted out. If the argument is to remove predicated on cost, I'd like to speak to that. I understand risk planning. I prepare reports that summarize 1, 5, 10-year, and 20-year budgets and the need for repairs and maintenance that must be done in order to maintain the integrity of a structure. There has been no maintenance other than salt, which is only added to the deterioration. And now we are faced with the massive cost impact of that neglect. And I'm not going to buy into the impact of COVID either. Risk 101, emergency preparedness planning, global pandemics, floods, tornadoes, extensive forests and fires. You need to budget accordingly. The last financial decision should not trump equity, diversity, and inclusion. Dismantling the Peel Street Bridge is not an equitable decision. Further, I feel strongly that your mandate is to serve, to preserve, to maintain, to improve, and to value the diversity of those living in this community. I ask that you acknowledge that the Peel Street Bridge does play an important role in providing safe access, and that it is critically a link to the heritage and the diverse cultures that thrive amongst the farms and the back roads of our community and county. Thank you for the 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Council, any questions for the delegation? I don't see any, so thank you very much for the presentation, and we will move to our last delegation. Cindy Weber. Cindy, are you there?
I am here.
Hi, Cindy. You got 10 minutes. Your time won't start until you start, and I'll let you know when you're at your 9th minute.
Mayor Shantz and Township councilors, I live on the other side of the bridge, with the majority of my neighbors being from the Old Order community. I've spoken with my neighbors, and after discussions with James Martin, who's the deacon of the Winterburn Church, and Jesse Ginrich, who owns Windrose Farms in Winterburn, I volunteered to speak to their major concerns of the Mennonite community as they raised in their letters to the township. And my thanks to Ryan Tucker for finding these letters and contacting James to discuss personally. The major concerns are safety and travel time. The closure of the Peel Street Bridge has forced the Mennonite community to travel farther distances using the following routes: Northfield Drive, Somhill Road through Conestoga, Catherine Street, Highway 86. These routes are extremely busy, speeding vehicles driven by impatient drivers. The roads are congested with narrow roads and bridge. The routes are congested with narrow roads and bridges, which cause traffic bottlenecks behind the buggies, leading drivers to take risks as they try and pass. This will certainly lead to collisions between passing cars, oncoming motorists, pedestrians, cyclists, and the buggies, with potential for fatalities. The cost to restore and modify the Peel Street Bridge are not worth the high cost of accidents, but especially the loss of a life. Using these 4 routes takes the Mennonite community far longer to reach their destination. They travel at 10 kilometers an hour. Ask yourself how you would feel about being asked to detour an extra hour one way to reach North Waterloo. Opening the bridge would allow for a shortcut from Winterburn to Northfield Drive, greatly reducing the travel time and improve the safety for my neighbors. With the closure of Peel Street Bridge, vehicles are ignoring the township signage and traveling over the Mennonite Buggy Bridge, which connects Crooks Track Road to Buggy Lane. This has led to a fast deterioration of this private bridge that's maintained by the Mennonite community and who bear the full cost of the repairs. The Mennonite community pay their taxes and they don't complain about contributing to services they never used. Examples that were given to me are the splash pad, the skate park, hockey arenas, community swimming pools, the ion train. The decision to remove and not replace the bridge is in direct opposition to the council's vision and value to support our rural community, the goal of connected transportation and the preservation of the Mennonite community, which is used to promote tourism in our area. No action is not the answer. Together, we need to come up with a solution that will better Woolwich Township as a whole, rather than the same concerns and the same solutions being raised in a couple of years while that bridge just continues to deteriorate. The preferred solution is a new pedestrian buggy bridge. I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Cindy. Council, any questions? I don't. Council Merlehan had an itch there. I don't see any questions. That's the last delegation for this. We did have an email sent to council. It was not sent in time to be sent out to council before the meeting. So I've been asked to read it, a decision that might be regretted after hearing me read this. This is from Jean Halbaum of Dune Village Road in Kitchener, who's the former chair of the Heritage Planning Advisory Committee of the region of Waterloo. And she writes, Mayor Shantz and councillors, Woolwich Township. Indeed, the residents of Winterburn and area have excellent reasons for appealing to you to have the Winterburn Bridge, Peel Street Bridge saved through its rehabilitation. Firstly, rehabilitation supports Mennonite buggy traffic. No longer will the Mennonite farm families have to lengthen their journey and use the less safe route of highways to get from one side of the river to the other a circular route no less. Secondly, rehabilitation offers a recreation facility for cyclists and pedestrians. Amenities such as this bridge are as important as arenas and ballparks. Now that we are COVID bound, our awareness of the need for outdoor facilities offering space is heightened. Thirdly, Winterburn Bridge, this double span Pratt Camelback through truss, is an important landmark in the rural landscape. It is the only one in the region of Waterloo. It acts as a gateway to the village of Winterburn. The structure has strong visual appeal. It has been captured by local aerial photographer Carl Hebert and famous local artist Peter Ettrell Snyder. And the bridge has caught the eye of local field naturalist and record columnist Sam McKay, who wrote, "Best views by far from these iron bridges on our country roads, offering glimpses of rippling water. Arch Truss and Beam, the Grand River Watershed Heritage Bridge Inventory." Fourthly, financial support is most likely available if sought from Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program as part of federal and provincial COVID recovery plans. To conclude, on the basis of supporting local transportation needs, recreation, heritage, and tourism, the rehabilitation, restoration of the Winterburn Peel Street Bridge meets the investment of taxpayer dollars. Thank you for your consideration, and signed, Jean Halbum. So that is it for delegations and presentations. There is a recommendation in our agenda package. The recommendation is for an issue for the Director of Infrastructure to issue the notice of completion for the Peel Street Bridge Class EA project. And issuing that environmental assessment would go along with that, mean we are endorsing the recommended options, which are short-term, close the bridge, and long-term, remove the bridge. So even though the recommendation is explicit in being about the environmental assessment, it would carry with it those other two decisions. So that recommendation has been brought to council by staff. Does anyone care to deal with it? Mayor Shantz moves the recommendation.
No, I'm with some amendment to it.
Mayor Shantz, I will give you the floor and you can do with it what you would like.
Thank you. Yeah, I would move the recommendation, but I would also add to it that we forward the report to MP Tim Lewis and MPP Mike Harris with a cover letter stating the urgency of getting funding to move ahead with the rehabilitation of this as it continues to deteriorate.
So there's a motion on the floor, or there's a motion, sorry, that's been tabled. That would include the recommendation plus a letter to the MP and the MPP. Councilor Martin?
I have some comments that I'll share in a minute.
Okay.
But I'm going to ask for a deferral on this issue, and I'll tell you why. On two occasions.
So Councilor Martin, I'm just going to stop you right there, okay? Because we do have a motion that's been put forward, and if there's a second to the motion, then you could have a motion to defer. The motion to defer would supersede the motion. But we first would like to see if there's a second to the mayor's motion. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So would anybody care to second Mayor Shantz's motion? So there's no second. So now, Councilor Martin, you'd like to move to defer the recommendation?
Yes, I would, and I'll tell you why, if I may. On two occasions, I have asked staff not to bring this report to us until they, and Jared will know this to be true, until they sit down with our treasurer and look at financing options. What would it look like if we added 2% to our infrastructure levy? What would it look like if we added 3% to it and debenture this over 20 years? And I don't see any of that in this report. That's something specifically that I have asked for. And can I make some other comments?
Absolutely, the floor is yours.
Okay. A number of years ago in my Kitchener days, I spent a weekend in London at a convention. And at dinner time at night, I sat across the road, across the table from the Heritage Minister of the federal government. And I thought, goodness, what are we going to talk about? But it was interesting. We had good discussion. And that was just about the time that Kitchener rehabilitated an arch bridge, which Gene's well aware of it, and spent way too much money and still had an old bridge. And this is what he told me. The first test in any heritage thing is that you need to get value for your money. And when he spoke about the Kitchener Bridge, he said you have to remember in 1921 when it was built, it was state of the art. It's had its life cycle. Now it's time to build another state of the art bridge. We can never put enough money into this old bridge because underneath it, we've seen all the pictures. The pictures, it wore out. My proposal would be that we build a new one-lane bridge, keep a section of the old bridge to mount on the new bridge, and that would benefit everybody. I'd remind you that in one term of council, which is 4 years, we pedal away more money in recreation subsidizing them than what it would cost to build a new bridge. That's a fact. If we build a new bridge, that would keep everybody happy. The Mennonites have something they can use. The heritage people have a section of the bridge that they can use, look at, and it'll still be there. And the people that use it strictly for recreation, they can use it. It's a win from everybody. And I'm not surprised that, I'll keep it short because Cindy, I think, read my notes. I'm not surprising that she said a lot of things that I would have said because we spoke to the same people. So I'll have some other comments. They said that we will remove the bridge for you. I'm not sure what that would look like. I can only imagine. They also said that we want to keep a section of the old bridge. They will clean it up and paint it for us. And so I'll go to some other comments, and I won't mention names. I'll just say JB from my Floridale days, and Fred will figure out who this is. He said, are you really telling me that you can't build a new bridge, that it's not possible? He said, we have the wealthiest township in the region with the most growth and the most income. He said, if that is a fact, there is something wrong. Administration's too high, we spend too much on recreation, trails, etc. Another gentleman yesterday told me, I'll call him AB, and he lives within a stone throw from the other truss bridge that we have. He said much the same. And he said, if you're asking us to go 10 kilometers out of our way, it's like you driving 100 kilometers out of the way with your car. We know that to be true because when we had to do detours, when Sawmill Road was closed, all the crime that people had to drive out to line 86 to go around, and they were in cars. As it was mentioned, the Mennonites pay their taxes. They pay their portion for a whole number of things they don't use, and that's fine. I pay for things that I don't use, and I'm not complaining. But we owe them something. I think we owe it to them to give them something that they need. And that is a new bridge and something they can use. I think that's what all I have. And again, like I said, I will ask for deferral on this issue.
Okay.
Until we get some other information.
Excellent. So Councillor Martin would like to move a deferral. If I could, Councillor Martin, because the recommendation doesn't contain anything about a decision, could I get staff to kind of clarify what they need from council tonight? Does the notice for the EA completion need to be approved? And could we defer the decision on what to happen? Like, can those two issues be separated or are they interlinked? What do you need from council here? I'll leave it at that. Mr. Tucker?
Chair McMillan. So like you alluded to, filing the notice of study completion would mean council agreed with staff's recommendation. If council does not want to agree with that, that's totally council's decision. But we would need some direction on what the preferred solution would be in council's mind at that point. We cannot file the notice of study completion until we have an actual preferred solution that is endorsed by council.
So if we were to defer the whole thing, are there any consequences to us not having the notice of completion for the environmental assessment?
So as long as the notice of study completion is not submitted, the EA is still open. And there's no statutory timelines for the EA, so we can keep this EA open as long as council decides.
Okay, so I think hearing that there's no legal consequences to deferring, that would, Captain Canada, you popped up on my screen here. Are you hoping to contribute to this?
Sure, thank you, through you, Chairman McMillan. Just for council's benefit, I absolutely acknowledge what Councillor Martin had discussed about debenture. He had communicated that with us. That issue really resides with council. That's not a staff decision to decide if we are going to debenture for a structure. I just wanted to remind council that in budget deliberations last year, council did endorse debenture for some paving roads. That certainly is in their care and control. If that's something that council wants to consider, to look at debenture for, either rehabilitation of this historic structure or replacement or anything of the like. I just want council to be aware that by not making a decision, I guess on the recommendation, we're sort of still in limbo. Not sure what the ask would be of staff at this point. We've made our best recommendation given what we have. So I think to Councillor Martin's point, is there any discussion to be had at a council level to sort of dive into that area? Really, I think Councillor Shantz asked an appropriate question of staff regarding money, and you can see what we tried to balance here. And I think Ryan has done a great job of trying to balance all of what we are aware of, and just reminding council of our annual budget for 53 other structures in the township is about 1.7 million. So there are a lot of needs and a lot of infrastructure work required in Woolwich as a whole. So appreciate the complexity and the difficult part here in dealing in Winterburn. But I guess we would respectfully ask, if this isn't a recommendation, what would you like staff to further dive into, I guess maybe is something to put to council.
Yeah, I think I hear what you're saying there, Mr. Poupe. Councillor Martin, perhaps it would be appropriate to add to your motion a future agenda item where council could discuss the matter. If we're not going to take staff's recommendation, we probably need to discuss among council what route we would like to take. Would you like to add a future agenda item to your motion, Councillor Martin?
Yes, whatever we have to do.
Okay.
I would like some open discussion about the option.
So I think a future agenda item would allow us to have that open discussion without doing it tonight at 11 p.m. I don't know how the rest of council feels about that, but I think that might be, rather than us trying to figure out what we want to do tonight, but I'm open to what the rest of council feels. Mayor Shantz, you had your hand up?
Yeah, no, I'm quite all right with having discussions some other time. It's getting quite late tonight. But I just wanted to just say, what do we need to do to make application for something like I said before, another funding source? And what, do you have any sense of what the time frame would be for that? Maybe that's Mr. Patrick, I'm not sure.
Mr. Petherick, Mr. Poupe, do you guys want to take a crack at that?
Mr. Chairman, I'll take a first crack. So right now, I don't believe there is a program that is open that would be fitting to this, especially at this dollar. But it is something I think what Mayor Shantz was looking at was to have something go to our MP and MPPs to say, you know what, we are going to be looking for as municipalities continued infrastructure funding. And, you know, we have a really good project from a community perspective that we think, you know, should be looked at.
Yeah, and through you, Chairman McMillan, to Mayor Shantz as well. We have applied for Peel already under a stream, and Mr. Tucker has done that. I just remind council that it took us about 3 applications on Glasgow before we received any upper government funding as well. So, you know, just we absolutely are cognizant of that, and that's why I think it was crafted in such a way on this EA to provide that window of opportunity.
I got 10:57. Does somebody want to move to allow us to extend past 11 p.m.? Councilor Millihan, thank you. Second, Councilor Shantz, all in favor? Staying here till midnight. Thanks for the reminder. Okay, so if we don't take the recommendation from staff as written, they're going to need some direction from council. A discussion at a future time might make sense. Councilor Martin, do you feel okay with that? Moving a deferral with a future agenda item? Would somebody care to second Councilor Martin's motion? Councilor Shantz, second. Would anyone like to speak to the motion to defer? Councilor Millihan?
Yeah, through you, Councillor McMillan, just general comments. I kind of feel like we owe the residents of Winterburn a little bit of explanation as to where we're thinking. I was waiting to hear from Ward 3 councillors because this discussion and the letters and phone calls I've got, it seems like there's a lot of grievances in Winterburn that I was completely unaware of. You know, that is definitely a different conversation, but I think it is a conversation that should happen. The speeding issues on Catherine Street, I don't really understand the connection that the residents were making there. I understand people are speeding, and you know, we deal with speeding and Mennonites, people driving crazy right in Elmira constantly. That's an issue right across the township, and I feel for the people in Winterburn because that is, you know, the main drag. Again, that's another conversation that perhaps Mayor Shantz and the Ward 3 councillors can advocate on your behalf to the region for sidewalks and some traffic calming measures, signage.
Can we talk to the motion?
Sorry?
I'm getting there.
It's 11 o'clock. Can we talk to the motion that has come up?
Okay, we'll talk to the motion. I love the bridge. I think the bridge is amazing. I went and visited the bridge on Saturday and I went all around it and took lots of pictures. The view is incredible, and I would be all in favor of not preserving what is there because it's clearly past its expiry date when you look at how much work it would need. But I think some sort of structure should be there for the residents, not just the Mennonites, but all of the residents to use either recreationally or, I don't know. It would have to be bigger for driving across because that bridge, I would not drive my own vehicle across. But anyway, I'm fine with a deferral, but I think the Winterburn residents who waited 3 hours to speak deserve to know where we stand as councillors on this issue. So that's all I wanted to do. So
yeah,
sorry.
I think everybody who spoke as a delegation will have registered, and perhaps we can reach out to them to let them know when the topic is on an agenda again. And I think Councilor Merlahan, you brought up some good points there. We're probably getting into that conversation that would happen at a future agenda item. So speaking just to the deferral, anyone? I don't see any, so I'll call the question. All in favor of deferral? Opposed? And that motion is carried.
That's a warning.
Did the clocks change?
Still.
We're all about to be arrested here. Is there anything else we need here?
Yes, yeah, there's the rec fees.
Yeah, so we can't go anywhere here, folks.
So we'll need to take a pause for staff to be able to reset the security.
Yeah. So the next thing on the item, we're gonna pause here for 1 second. The next item is the recreation and community services and the COVID-19 impacts. And I see Ann MacArthur has turned her video on. Before we do that, because we're waiting on staff here for something, and we're all gonna be arrested, you're gonna be in the office by yourself tomorrow.
There's another report. There's a DS-36.
Source protection. You could ask Mark whether
Yeah,
that
sorry,
could be deferred.
Yeah, I got that. I got that up. It's on I've got it on here. But Councillor Shantz, you said that you had some other business. I think we still have quorum here. Do you want to maybe touch on what the other business is while we're waiting for Clerk Hummel to call off the security guards? And
Sure.
Perfect.
I can do that. It doesn't take any kind of motion or anything like that. I just want to, maybe out of order, but I want to circle back to the Ontario Clean Air Alliance. And I think we did the council a disservice by not allowing to have a wholesome debate on climate change and global warming. I didn't appreciate having words put in my mouth and not being allowed to respond to the comment. I don't feel if it should have been up to the councillor, to one councillor to make a decision to not have any further staff reports on this topic or more information. We are asking something specific, unlike the councillor suggested. We are specifically asking Ontario government to eliminate gas-powered plants. We should have deferred this vote, but we're cut short and not allowed to even offer that option. I support climate action, just not this resolution. We made a snap decision because we had a large agenda, which is not acceptable. So I guess I'm just a little disappointed that we handled that the way we did.
Yeah, I apologize for that, Councillor Shantz. I do recall that I called the question. I did see you put up your hand, and I thought it was for further debate. If it was for a motion to defer supersedes a motion, supersedes the motion that's on the floor. So I do apologize. I did not read the urgency in your hand going up, and in an attempt to get us out of here before midnight, I did call that question. So I'll take full responsibility for that, and I certainly do apologize.
You're muted, Larry.
Hit the wrong button. Got two computers on the go. I was saying that it was for both, actually. I wanted to debate it further as well. And I thought we should have deferred. So
We can't hear you at all, Councillor Shantz. We got sirens going off here now. Hopefully the building's not on fire. This would be a terrible time to have a fire.
So, Mr. Chair, you could ask Mark, and the two reports could be deferred.
Anne has already said hers, Ken.
Well, a motion to adjourn trumps everything that's on the floor, so.
We just push it to the next agenda.
Yeah, any councillor can table a motion to adjourn and.
Can we stay and watch the police show up?
What did he say? I can't even hear him.
I said, can we stay and watch the police show up?
Oh, yeah. You're gonna watch us getting dragged out of here with our hands behind our backs. We have quorum.
If there's nothing else encouraging.
Yeah, we still have quorum.
I would move adjourn.
There's a motion on the floor to adjourn. Would somebody care to second? Councilor Reddekopp seconds. All in favor? Opposed? Meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much.
Good night, all.
It's fine. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
done?
we're good.
We're done?
We're good.
Okay.
Good job.
Oh, that sucks. I didn't know Larry wanted to defer that.
There are still delegations on the line. I don't know how to get them. Oh, I'll just,
I feel terrible about that.
stop recording, but there's still some.
So you can just leave the meeting.
Leave the meeting.